Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to 2024, and welcome, as always, to the 43rd episode of the FilmBrony podcast. I am, of course, the guy in charge of all of this, Nick Canino, and with me, I have a guest who came up with this whole podcast. So, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, safe to say that last year has been a difficult year for Hollywood. So let's just hope that this year's way better.
Me too. Me too. And boy, have we got a show for you. And boy, have we got a show for you guys today. We're going to go over our usual stuff, which is the Blu-ray Showcase, as well as some of the movies that Søren and I reviewed this December. Most of them. There's still some that we still haven't seen yet, which is why the best of list won't be happening until later on in the month. But yeah, but after all of this, we got the top 15 worst films that both he and I saw in 2015 coming up after our Blu-ray Showcase and the and the reviews. So, without further ado, let's get started.
All right. Blu-ray Showcase. This Alfred Hitchcock collection, we got The Wrong Man, Dial for Murder, I Confess, and Suspicion. This Audrey Hepburn collection, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Funny Face, My Fair Lady, Paris When It Sizzles, Roman Holiday, Sabrina, and War and Peace. Blast of Silence.
Nice.
Bones and All.
Sweet. That's what I also got, too. I also got that, too. Bones and All.
The Brothers McMullen. The Iron Man trilogy. Pacific Rim and Godzilla.
Nice.
Pinocchio, the Guillermo del Toro version.
I also have this, too.
And last but not least, the OG Star Trek movies.
Nice. So as promised, I got a bunch of Blu-rays with me today. A couple of them I've already shown on here, but I might as well show it one more time, regardless. First up is Toy Story 4.
While it is the weakest of the ones, it's still really good. It'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see the fifth one down the line.
Yeah. Next up, Possessor, the Brandon Cronenberg film.
Pretty underrated.
Yeah, really. I agree. Next up, one of the best movies of 2020, Promising Young Woman.
Good.
And then I did mention Bones and All, so here it is right here. And to answer your questions, I sadly didn't get a chance to see it yet. Sorry.
I did. You'll hear about it in a little bit.
Okay. And then these next two are A24 films that I got. After Sun.
That's a good movie.
Yep. Showing Up, the Kelly Reichardt movie. That's one of my favorites of this year. I mean, of 2023.
Yeah.
And then Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Can't wait to see Part 2 in a couple of years.
Me too.
In a year or two.
Absolutely. And then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem.
I'll have to get it someday.
All right. And then I decided to save these other three for last because, the next two are Criterion releases. First up is Alfonso Cuarón's Roma.
One of his best and one of the best of 2018.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And then we have Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Another good one.
Yep, absolutely. And then there's a reason I decided to save these last three for last, because I loved all three of these movies. And first up, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio, as Søren mentioned. Next up, one of the very, very best movies I've seen this year, alongside Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer.
If that's not in my top two at the end of the year, I'll probably go insane.
Yeah, same with me. And finally, man, was I excited to get this one for the film's 30th anniversary. Schindler's List.
That's a classic right there.
It's classic, and best of all, not only does it come with the 4K on Blu-ray, but you also get the certificate of authenticity as well as this photo,
Hmm.
the booklet involving the behind the scenes of the making of the film, and pictures from the film as well.
Hmm.
And all this only costed me like $35.
Hmm. Cool.
Yeah, I was really excited to get this, and boy, is it in my hands now. Thank goodness, especially since it's one of my all-time favorite movies. All right, well, it's time for us to do the movie reviews as usual. Søren, why don't you go first?
All right, then. First up, we have Maestro. And Bradley Cooper's sophomore film wants to tell about the legendary composer Leonard Bernstein, but unfortunately, to me, it seems like he has nothing to say about him. I will say the cast is solid, especially Cooper himself and Kelly Mulligan, and the makeup for the main character is fantastic. But unfortunately, this was a mess. The movie clearly wants to be Tar from last year, but my problem is that the story doesn't really do much to develop the main character or develop his relationship with his wife. Also, the cinematography has solid lighting and use of color, but it overcompensates on long shots. Sometimes it can look breathtaking, and other times it just focuses on certain scenes for way too long, and as a result, this movie is just boring and unsatisfying. This is clearly not the big best picture this movie clearly thinks it is, as it needed an overhaul in the script department. As it is, I'm unfortunately giving Maestro the seal of accuracy.
To me, I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was brilliant. I will agree that there were a couple aspects of the film that did feel a bit rushed. No spoilers, by the way, but that's really my only complaint with the film. Everything else I thought was terrific, from its story to its directing and writing to the acting, especially Bradley Cooper, who is magnificent as Leonard, excuse me, Bernstein. Carey Mulligan was also fantastic in the film too. This is like one of the best performances I've seen from an actress in 2023. Um, the soundtrack is fantastic. The cinematography was fantastic. Um, the editing was phenomenal. It's very well paced throughout. Um, and there's this one sequence, no spoilers by the way. There's this one 7-minute sequence that had my jaw drop while also making me go, how did they do this? Yeah, and the production values and costume design are terrific, and above all, I thought Maestro was a magnificent film. It's not as amazing as Cooper's last film, which is A Star Is Born, but nevertheless I still thought Maestro was a fantastic film, and it's one of my favorites of 2023, which is why, as of right now, it's earning a 9.5 out of 10 or an A, but it will eventually go up to a 10 the more I think about this one. So, but right now, it's a 9.5 out of 10.
Next, we have The Boy and the Heron, otherwise known as How Do You Live, otherwise known as Hayao Miyazaki comes out of his retirement to show mediocre generations of animation how it's truly done. This movie boasts the same stunning animation that's been mostly consistent with Studio Ghibli, as well as a solid cast. The music is astounding, and the story is both compelling and thought-provoking. However, I do have my fair share of nitpicks, such as the pacing can be a little fast or slow at times, and there are scenes showcasing the scenery and such, which would have benefited from just letting the animation and music tell the story, but then they just have the characters talk over it. Like, it's show don't tell for a reason. And as for the rest of my problems, I'm gonna have to go into spoilers to explain. So you all know the deal by now. So when the main character goes to confront the fantasy world, there's this maid character who gets dragged along, and then suddenly she just disappeared without a trace. And it's not until the end where he goes back home that the movie is like, oh yeah, she's a thing. Well, there she is anyway. Like, why was she even in this movie? Also, the ending was really rushed. It's like, so after he goes back home, let's just cut to 2 years later where we see a 2 second glance at them leaving the new house. And then it just stops like that. So while this is far from Hayao very best, it's definitely a return to form for Studio Ghibli, and I'm eager to see what he does next. I'll give it the seal of approval.
To me, this is one of the best films of the year, and let me explain why. This not only is it a triumphant return for Hayao Miyazaki after his last movie, The Wind Rises, was released back in late 2013, but this is absolutely one of the most breathtaking, exhilarating, and deeply moving animated films I've ever seen. From its wonderful animation to its fantastic story, and how the movie does a fantastic job exploring themes involving family, grief, etc. As well as, and not only is it very well directed, but it's very well written. The voice acting was wonderful. And keep in mind, I saw the English dub version of the film, so this is just me talking about the English dub. All I can say is everybody was fantastic. From Luca Padovin. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but he was wonderful as Mahito Maki. Robert Pattinson was fantastic as the voice of the Grey Heron. Gemma Chan, Christian Bale, Mark Hamill, Florence Pugh, Willem Dafoe, and Dave Bautista are all fantastic. All give out fantastic vocal performances. And the score is fantastic. It's very well edited throughout. It's very well. I have to disagree with you on the pacing, Søren, because I thought it was expertly paced throughout. There are some moments of great humor, and I have to disagree with you again on the ending, because I thought the ending was absolutely brilliant, and it's one of my favorites I saw in the movie in 2023. Yeah, overall, this is a brilliant triumphant return for Hayao Miyazaki, and this is the movie that, from what Søren described here in the chat, yeah, really, they definitely needed this after that abomination. Even though I still haven't seen it, but what the hell do I know? But yes, it's one of the best films I've seen this year, and without a doubt, I mean, God damn it, it's one of the best movies I've seen in 2023, and without a doubt, I'm gonna give The Boy and the Heron. Hold on. I'm gonna give The Boy and the Heron a 10 out of 10 or an A+. Well done, Hayao Miyazaki. All right, so next film I'm going to talk about is Leave the World Behind. For those wondering what the film is about, Leave the World Behind is based on the 2020 novel of the same name, and it's an apocalyptic psychological thriller starring Julia Roberts, Mahershala Ali, and Ethan Hawke as they attempt to make sense of the gradual breakdown in phones, television, and other regularly used technology, which points to the potential cataclysm. Yeah, mean that there's catastrophe going on in the world. Now here's what I'll say about the film. Since it's splitting a lot of people, some love it, some hate it. To me, I love the movie until the ending. Like, here's what I like. Like I was loving the film throughout, but when that ending happened, it was just like it kind of ruined the film from being. It kind of kept the film from being one of the best I've seen in 2023. But here's what I'll say about the film: the screenplay did a great job with the way it handled its characters, dialogue, its consistent tone, and themes of class disparity, race, the fragility of society, dangers of isolation, and the perils of technology in a well-detailed manner. It's very well directed. The acting, especially from Julia Roberts, Ethan Hawke, and Mahershala Ali, was terrific. The musical score felt haunting and intriguing. The cinematography was terrific and one of the best I've seen in the movie in 2023. The editing was great. The apocalyptic undertones were very, very well handled, and it resulted in the film having some real tension as a result of this. However, like I said before, I was loving the film up until the ending. And I'll explain why the ending like doesn't work. The ending, I get what they were trying to do with the ending, but the problem is that I get they were trying to be ambiguous, but I get they were trying to be ambiguous with its ending, but the problem is it ended in such an abrupt note that it left more questions than just answers, and it leaves you feeling a bit frustrated as a result of this. And because of that, it did make me wish the story would have felt a bit more consistent. It felt contrived and messy at times. And I will not lie, there were a few times where the movie does suffer through a couple pacing issues here and there, but that's really it. Overall, I found Leave the World Behind to be a well-acting and intriguing apocalyptic thriller that had me on the edge of my seat throughout most of the films. So, in either way, I'm gonna give Leave the World Behind a 7 out of 10 or a B. Good, but not great.
Next, we have Godzilla Minus One. And this was a fun movie to tide you over until next year's Godzilla X Kong sequel next year. While some scenes can feel a bit slow and or derivative at times, what makes it worth seeing is seeing Godzilla stomping around and tearing shit apart. And it's elevated by some of the best visual effects of the year. The human characters, while not gonna win these actors any awards, are still interesting enough so that you aren't just twiddling your thumbs before the next Godzilla sighting. And when they do interact with Godzilla, it's an immersive experience. Not the most well-written blockbuster, but one that'll satisfy Godzilla fans all over. I'm giving it the seal of approval.
All right, and then next movie I'm going to talk about is Eileen. Now, Eileen is a psychological thriller based on the 2015 novel of the same name, and it's set in 1960s Massachusetts, where it trails the parasitic relationship between two women working at a juvenile detention facility. I wasn't a fan of the director's last movie, which was Lady Macbeth, despite Florence Pugh giving out a wonderful performance in that film. But I was interested to see what he was going to do, how he, along with the author of the film, the author of the book, who also co-wrote the movie, was going to handle it. And here's what I'll say about the movie. The acting was absolutely terrific. Like, okay, so the acting was great, especially from Anne Hathaway and Thomasin McKenzie, who are both fantastic in this movie. The soundtrack was fantastic. The cinematography was terrific. The production values and costume design were great, since it really does feel like you're back in the 1960s. And the twist was admitted, and I will admit, I did find the twist to be very clever. It was one of those twists that I did not expect coming from a mile away, and that alone was the reason why I ended up really liking the twist. However, this is my pick for the most overrated movie I've seen in 2023, and the reasons are: the story felt disjointed and misguided. The screenplay was an absolute mess in terms of its characterization and tone. Like, it wants to be a black comedy, and then it wants to be a psychological drama, and then it wants to be a coming of age. Like, it wants to be a coming of age black comedy, but then it wants to but then it wants to be like a psychological drama. Like, which tone are you even going for, movie? It's clumsily directed. There were some editing choices made in the film that felt uneven. The pacing was a wonky mess. And although I did mention I liked the twist, the third act, however, felt so rushed, especially with the ending. Like all of a sudden, it tries to be like a 70s like B movie exploitation like film, and it tries to be like a homage to those 70s B movie exploitation movie films, and it just does not work on so many levels because of how rushed it felt. And it also tries to explore themes involving like fear and desire, but it felt like they didn't explore much of those themes at all. And I forgot to mention there was no tension or atmosphere built, mainly due to how rushed the story felt and how messy the screenplay felt as well. Yeah, overall, Eileen features some terrific on-screen girl performances by Anne Hathaway and Thomas and McKenzie, and the film does have some memorable moments here and there. But the film felt like nothing more than a disjointed and misguided mess. And I know I might be in a minority on this, given that it has like an 86% of Rotten Tomatoes, but actually 85 of Rotten Tomatoes and a 71 on Metacritic. But I'm sorry, I can't lie about my opinion. This is the most overrated movie that I've seen this entire year, and I'm unfortunately going to have to give Eileen a disappointing 4.5 out of 10 or a C. I'm sorry to those that like it, but I just could not get on board with this one. Sorry.
Next, I have Chicken Run 2 Dawn of the Nugget, and this is the latest film from Aardman Animation, and it's safe to say it's their best one in 8 years. Still, given my feelings on Early Man and Shaun the Sheep 2, that's not really saying much. Just like the first movie, it delivers a fun adventure filled with colorful characters and animation, as well as some good humor. However, it's not without its faults. For instance, Zachary Levi sounds nothing like Mel Gibson. Some of the jokes didn't quite land as well as others, and it's got a few continuity contrivances and cliches you've seen in other films like this before. Plus, it didn't really explain how Mrs. Tree survived the end of the first movie, given that she was squashed by a door in that first one. It's not quite as somehow Palpatine returned, but it still kind of bothered me a little. Regardless, I think this is a fun return to this classic franchise, which will entertain both fans of the first one and their kids as well. I'll get down the Nuggets a seal of approval. Next movie, though, Rebel Moon Part 1.
Oh, God.
This is supposed to be Zack Snyder's answer to Rogue One, but apparently he doesn't know the difference between homage and total knockoff. I wouldn't mind so much if the movie itself was entertaining, but turns out it's anything but that. The characters are bland and unmemorable. The action scenes are poorly handled due to the overuse of slow motion, even by Zack Snyder standards. The music sounds like the demo reels for Junkie XL's own BBS and Justice League themes, and even the effects aren't that good. Sometimes it looks something out of Star Wars, but the rest of the time it just looks like a half-assed Sci-Fi Channel TV show.
Damn, that's a sick burn right there.
After this movie, I completely take back putting Part 2 on my most anticipated movies of next year, because something tells me that it's going to be the exact same shit. And I hear there's going to be a director's cut somewhere down the line, but I bet that 75% of the problems I have here aren't going to be apparent.
Okay. Go ahead.
Same cliche story, same boring characters, same half-ass effects. Zack Snyder, I love you, but it's apparent that you can't write original stories. First Sucker Punch and now this. Stick to adaptations. As for Rebel Moon, I'm giving it the seal of disapproval.
Okay, let me get this off my chest really quick. So Zack Snyder claims that he's releasing a director's cut on Netflix very soon, and that leads me to the question: why didn't you release it in the first place?
I don't know, to capitalize on the Snyder cut, I guess. But at the same time, though, if this is your director's cut, Why not release it at the start? It's not like Justice League where there was a ton of studio interference.
Like there was no excuse for this. Honestly, this shows why I'm not a fan of Zack Snyder. I mean, the only films I liked from Zack Snyder were Dawn of the Dead, which James Gunn wrote for that film. 300, Watchmen, which I feel is his best film to date, and the criminally underrated Man of Steel. But otherwise, sorry, but I'm not a fan of his works at all. I respect the guy, I respect his talent, but I'm not a fan of Zack Snyder. Sorry, Christian, if you're watching this.
Yeah. Next movie, though, is Wonka.
Yes.
After Roald Dahl's original novel inspired one of the most beloved films in film history, as well as a reboot with a massive cult following, Paul King has some big shoes to fill in terms of making a prequel about how Willy Wonka became the beloved chocolatier that he is. And it's safe to say he more than delivered. Timothy Chalamet makes Gene Wilder proud with his great performance as a title character, and the rest of the cast is stellar too. The writing, while a bit wonky at times, no pun intended, captures the same delight and wonderment as the Paddington movies. The production values and visual effects are both stunning and colorful, and the songs are both catchy and bound to put a smile on your face. So while this obviously won't replace the previous two movies, this movie is sure to deliver so much time and so charm. No, strike that, reverse it. To both kids and adults, and to both hardcore Wonka fans and casual moviegoers. I'm giving Wonka an enthusiastic seal of approval.
Um, that film, to answer your question, Meadowland film 2004, it's all right. It's an all right film. Wonka, I know I might be in a minority on this. Same thing with Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves, but I would be lying if I didn't say that I really loved Wonka. I really loved this movie. Yes, there were a couple callbacks that admittedly did feel a bit on the nose, and and at times some of the dialogue does feel a bit wonky at times, but that's really the only complaints I have with the film. The writing was solid. The story had me invested throughout. It's very well directed. Timothy Chalamet was fantastic as Willy Wonka. Obviously, Gene Wilder is the best Willy Wonka. There's no denying that. But I would argue that Timothy Chalamet is definitely up there. The rest of the acting was great too, especially from Calla Lane, who was wonderful as Noodle. Keegan-Michael Key, who was great in the film. Sally Hawkins and Rowan Atkinson, as well as Olivia Colman, and Hugh Grant was great as Lofty, the Oompa Loompa. The soundtrack was wonderful, especially with the musical numbers that really had me humming. The cinematography was brilliant. The editing was brilliant. It's very well paced throughout. Okay, so, and the production values and costume design was terrific, and I really, really adored the film's ending very much. So overall, oh yeah, and I really liked the villains too. I really liked how they developed the villains in the film as well. So overall, Wonka was delightful. It was entertaining, and it was absolutely fun for the whole family. And it's one of my. I know I might be in a minority on this, but you know what? It's one of my favorites of the year. Yes, it's not without its issues. Some of the jokes did fall a bit flat, and there's a couple of like callbacks that did feel a bit on the nose at times, but that's it. That's it. Everything else I really loved. 9.5 out of 10 or an A. Check it out. And you know what, Jose? Me too. I'm glad it did pretty well too.
Yeah, and I don't think it's gonna do as well as say Spider-Man No Way Home or Avatar 2, but it's good that this Christmas has its own big holiday movie.
Absolutely, yeah.
Next movie though, which
Oh
which is
god.
more than I can say about Aquaman: The Lost Kingdom.
Oh my god. More like Aquaman and the Who Gives a Shit Kingdom.
After the latest batch of DCEU films failed to recapture the success it had in the beginning, I was really hoping James Wan, Jason Momoa, and their team of visual effects artists would end this franchise on a high note. Unfortunately, this was far from the case. Just like the first movie, this one has a solid cast and delivers on some fun fight scenes. However, the biggest problem I have with this movie is that it's just the same movie as the first one.
It's the same movie.
After a tyrant from his past launches an attack on his people that threatens not just Aquaman's family but the entire world, he teams up with a fellow Atlantean to travel across the globe for a power that would determine the fates of their lives. Of course, there is at least one major difference. In one of these movies, he has to team up with a narcissistic and sociopathic cunt who throws a fit when things don't get their way, and in this movie, he teams up with his brother.
Oh my god, yeah. That was so poorly done.
Other than that, though, the characters don't get that much development. The story's kind of a mess. The effects aren't as good as the first movie, and at times it's like it goes from one plot point to another without anything to really back it up. So overall, it's apparent that the DCEU ended not with a bang, but with a whimper. I'll give Aquaman 2 the seal of mediocrity.
Look at this. Aquaman and the I don't give a flying fuck kingdom. Thank you. Thank you. I'm gonna have to credit you for that from now on. For that name. Thank you for that. Okay, so I have not been a fan of Okay, so this movie yeah, this was pretty bad. It wasn't as I'll say this, it wasn't as bad as The Flash, but it's still pretty bad. Like the only good things I'll say about the film is that there's a couple good performances from like Jason Momoa, Patrick Wilson, and oh god, who was that other guy that played oh yeah, and the guy that played David Kane or Black Manta. I'm gonna put his name in the description because in the chat because I don't want to butcher his name, but you know who I'm talking about. Yeah, he was great in the film. He was one of the best things about the film. The cinematography is good. There are some good action sequences in it, and you know what? I actually did like Rupert. Okay. So hold on. And Rupert Gregson Williams' score was actually pretty solid. Other than that, though, no, there was nothing else that I liked about the film. From its terrible story to its shitty writing, like I'm not even kidding. The writing was terrible. Not just from its characterization, as well as its dialogue, but with the amount of shoehorn and toilet humor jokes they threw in the film. Like, did you like Jason Momoa getting pee all over his mouth? Well, not once. Do you like that shit? Huh? No? Well, too bad, because they repeat that joke not once, not twice, but 3 times throughout. Kill me. Oh yeah, and it's clumsily directed. The rest of the acting wasn't that great. Randall Park was terrible in the film, and Dolph Lundgren was horribly wasted. So was Nicole Kidman. And you knew I was going to mention this actress. You know, I was going to mention this actress, Amber Turd. Yeah, really. Yeah, really. And it's not just because I hate what she did to Johnny Depp. That's far from the case. Okay, well, it is, but you guys get the point. The fact is, she's not in the film all that much, but even when she is absolutely terrible in the film. Like you couldn't even get a different actress to play Mira, so instead you had to bring back Amber Heard. Like, really, guys? Like, why not just get a different actress? Oh, that's right, because David Zaslav just wants the Benjamins. Fuck you.
At least she'll be replaced in James Gunn's DCU.
Yeah, really. Yeah, really. The editing was atrocious. It's poorly directed. And you know, I hate having to bring up the visual effects. And why am I not surprised about this? Jose stated WB is still keeping Velma. Because of course they are. Because it did well. It did well. Because the first season did well, even despite the fact that it was critically bombed by critics and audiences alike.
Here are my thoughts on both Zaslav and the aforementioned Amber Heard. Ah, shit, I forgot to unmute it.
Elegant? Well, I call that just rude. If I was just a little...
Yeah, really. And, you know, not only does the film have its share of cliches that you've seen in other films before, but the biggest problem with the film are the visual effects. Not once do you believe that the actors are really underwater, especially when you can literally tell that the actors are in a green screen. Like the green screen effects couldn't be any more obvious. And you know what? I hate having to bring this up. I hate having to bring. You know what? As much as I don't like this movie, I have to bring this up because you know, as much as I don't like James Cameron's Avatar: The Way of Water, at least the visual effects in that film were so stunning and well detailed that it makes you feel like that the actors are actually underwater and you're actually underwater with them. With Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, on the other hand, you could obviously tell it's green screen. You could obviously tell they're in a green screen. And it just destroys the magic as a result of this. Oh, and don't even get me started on the ending. Fuck this ending. Like, that was your best way to end it? That was your best way to end this movie? By basically reviewing that, like, by having Arthur reveal Atlantis' existence through an announcement at the United Nations and declares his intentions of making the kingdom a member state, and then all of a sudden it's just like fuck you. Yeah, 3 out of 10 or a D+. I didn't hate this as much as like The Flash or Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but okay, well, Ant-Man and the Wasp is Marvel, but you get the point. But in terms of the superhero films that I've seen this year, this is now tied with Shazam, Fury of the Gods as the third worst superhero film I've seen this year. This movie could rot in hell. Fuck this movie. And you know what? I'm glad the DCEU is over. I'm glad it's over.
Yeah.
Let's just hope James Gunn can like get this whole thing back on track now that he's in charge of the whole thing in 2025.
Yeah.
Oh, and to answer your question, It's not the worst ending I've seen this year, but it was definitely one of the most insulting of the year.
It's still Dick's the Musical. Nothing's topping that shit.
Yeah, really. For me, it's The Exorcist Believer, but we'll talk about that later when we get to it.
And since the DCEU is done, let me just quickly go over my ranking. I have Justice League, then Aquaman The Lost Kingdom, then Blue Beetle, then The Flash, then Shazam Fury of the Gods, Wonder Woman 1984, Black Adam, Suicide Squad, Birds of Prey, Aquaman, Shazam, Wonder Woman, The Suicide Squad, James Gunn movie, Men of Steel, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and finally, Batman v Superman: The Ultimate Edition.
Honestly, I'm only gonna rank like three of the worst. Worst being Aquaman. Okay. The worst being Suicide Squad 2016, obviously, and then in second place is The Flash, and then in third place is a tie between Aquaman and The Lost Kingdom and Shazam: Fury of the Gods. All right. And then as for the best, well, it should be obvious what my top three best are. Number 3, Shazam. Number 2, the Suicide Squad, the James Gunn one. And my best is easily Wonder Woman 2017.
All right. Let's get to some actual cinemas, shall we? That being Poor Things.
Yes!
The best way to describe it is if Frankenstein met Tangled and they got into this weird and horny road trip. And this kind of story and style admittedly won't be for everyone, as recently evidenced by Austin Putnam's latest Worst of video. But for me, it's only Yorgos Lanthimos can make it work, and he more than did.
He did.
The story of a reborn child literally in an adult's body exploring the ways of life is really compelling, and it's thanks to the stellar screenplay. The production values, cinematography, and music are all hauntingly beautiful and appropriately weird, but it's the performances that tie the whole thing together. Mark Ruffalo and Willem Dafoe are both great, and Emma Stone gives off yet another award-worthy performance as the main character. So while this kind of movie may put up some people, I sure as hell got a kick out of it. I'll give it the seal of cinema.
This is one of the best movies I've seen this year. It's no wonder why this movie won the Golden Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival. This movie was absolutely one of the most powerful, seductive, mesmerizing, and exhilarating films I've seen in 2023. And it's the most bonkers movie I've seen in 2023. And yet, what I loved about this movie is that it's not afraid at being that. Yes, Yorgos Lanthimos' movies are required taste and will not be for everyone, but man, I loved every minute of this movie. Basically, imagine Frankenstein, but if Frankenstein was a woman and she was horny. That's literally the entire film. I mean, the jokes just. I mean, the comedy right there, that's just brilliant comedy. The story felt well-structured and highly engaging. Tony McNamara's screenplay was fantastic due to these following things: witty dialogue, excellent character development, and themes of desire, identity, and power feeling well executed. Yorgos Lanthimos' directing was fantastic, especially since you could see the vision and passion he had behind the camera. The acting was absolutely terrific. Emma Stone absolutely delivers another landmark performance in her career as Bella Baxter. What's amazing about her performance and why her character was so brilliantly written was because you could tell she's committed to that role. And as I stated before, she's basically what she would look like if Frankenstein was a woman and she was horny. And Mark Ruffalo was brilliant in this movie. This is one of the best performances I've seen from a supporting actor this entire year. I mean, it's hard to choose which one I love more between him and like Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer. But let's just say, Mark Ruffalo was just absolutely brilliant. I love that it was shot in black and white throughout the majority. That gave it such a nice touch. Like, it didn't surprise me that Robbie Ryan that the cinematography was done by Robbie Ryan, and it definitely shows. This was absolutely mesmerizing and one of the very best I've seen in the movie this entire year. It's so shot beautifully in black and white as well as in color. It's just brilliant. And as for the rest of the acting, from Willem Dafoe, Rami Youssef, Christopher Abbott, and Gerard Carmichael, they were all absolutely terrific. The musical score was fantastic. The editing was brilliant. It's very well paced throughout. It's got excellent production values and costume design, amazing practical effects and makeup. And what I loved about this movie is how bonkers yet clever the humor felt. Like, there were a lot of things in the film. I don't want to spoil anything because this is one of those movies where you guys need to see it for yourself. Even if you're not a fan of Yorgos Lanthimos, you got to at least admit that he put a lot of effort with the way he like combines like a lot of great bonkers and insane stuff. Like, that's where the comedy came from me. The fact that he made this the most insane movie of the year, and yet this was one of the fun times I had at the movies all year because of how much I was laughing hysterically. And how bonkers it was. And on top of that, it has one of the best endings I've seen in the movie this entire year. In 2023. Yeah. Without a doubt. Poor Things is one of the year's very best movies. Yes, it is insane, but it's unapologetic about it. And that's what I loved about this movie. It will not be for everyone, but for me, I definitely loved it. It's one of the very best films I've seen in 2023. And without a doubt, it's getting a 10 out of 10 or an A+, baby. 10 out of 10. Yorgos, well done, sir. And I cannot wait to see what you do next. Seriously. Well done.
Finally, for now, the Iron Claw. It's safe to call it this generation's Raging Bull, as it delivers a heart-wrenching character study about what goes behind the scenes in the personal life of a professional wrestler. Zac Efron, Jeremy Allen White, and Harris Dickinson are all stellar as the Von Erich brothers, but it's Hope McCallany who delivers all the award consideration as a father. While the story can be a bit slow at times, it's regardless engaging throughout his two-hour runtime. So whether you're a wrestling fan or a movie fan, this movie has something for everyone, as I'll give it the seal of approval.
Once again, we have another film that's going on my list of the best movies of 2023. I saw this a couple nights ago on December 30th, and let me tell you, I have not forgotten about this movie ever since. This is absolutely one of the best and most powerful films I've seen in 2023. It's a brilliant character study on how like one person's ego and pride really destroys a family all because either they want money or they want to win. And how writer-director Sean Durkin managed to capture the curse as well, the curse in a respectful and mature manner, is another reason why I feel this is one of the year's best. The acting was absolutely terrific. Zac Efron was fantastic as Kevin Von Erich. Honestly, he deserves an Oscar nomination for his performance. Jeremy Allen White and Harris Dickinson were both fantastic as Carrie and David Von Erich, respectively. And all three had terrific chemistry with one another. Since you could clearly tell, since it makes you believe that they are really brothers. And Holt McCallany was wonderful. Was fantastic as Fritz von Erich. I hate his character. For what he did to those boys, but especially when he pushed them too far. But man, the performance was so powerful that this is one of those characters you love to hate. And Lily James was also fantastic too in this movie as well. The soundtrack was fantastic. It's very well directed, very well written. The story was very well structured and highly engaging. The cinematography was terrific. The editing was fantastic. It's very well paced throughout. There are some moments I also love how it's not afraid of showing some I also love how the movie isn't afraid of having a couple of humorous moments in it as well. And without spoiling what happens, although it's not an easy film to watch, given what happens throughout the entire movie, given what happens to some of the boys throughout, it also has one of the most beautiful endings I've ever seen in the movie this entire year. Like, by the time the movie ended, my mom and I were literally in tears. We were literally in tears. Like, man. And I don't want to spoil what happens, but once you see it, you know what I'm talking about. And I also forgot to mention the wrestling sequences were fantastic in the way they were shot, directed, edited, and choreographed, as well as the amount of stunts they used for these. They were brilliantly done. They were fucking brilliant. Like, man. Yeah, overall, it's one of the year's best films. It was powerful. It was powerful and exhilarating, and Zac Efron absolutely deserves an Oscar nomination, and so does the actor that played the father. Absolutely one of the best films of the year, and I'm definitely going to give. This is the third time now I'm doing this, but you know what? It deserves it. I'm definitely going to give Iron Claw a 10 out of 10 or an A+. Well done to everybody involved.
And now with that out of the way,
oh boy, here we go.
now
You've all been waiting for this. Here it is.
Now, 2023 started off fairly strong. There were a ton of movies for me to look back fondly on, and even January wasn't that bad for the worst month for movies. But then things turned for the worse in mid-July as the writers and actors strike came into play due to Hollywood's incompetence. And as a result of all this, they pushed a lot of the big movies to next year in the vain event to save their marketing. Not just that, this was the year of crappy CEOs. Bob Iger has the humongous responsibility to save the Disney brand after Bob Chapek basically flushed it down the toilet. And it seems like the damage he's done can't be undone. But that's nothing compared to David Zaslav and his shit leadership that rivals Elon Musk. Just don't even get me started. This was also the year that a lot of movies I was dreading ended up impressing me, like Hypnotic, Knock at the Cabin, and Dungeons and Dragons. But at the same time, a few movies I was looking forward to ultimately underwhelmed me, like Aquaman 2, Dream Scenario, and Saltburn. Also, it seems like the superhero genre that once ruled Hollywood for the better half of the 2010s is continuing to dwindle, as not only has the DCEU ended with a whimper, but Marvel's been going downhill thanks to the likes of Ant-Man 3 and the Marvels bombing at the box office. So yeah.
Not to mention Jonathan Majors was not to mention how they also fired Jonathan Majors since he pled guilty.
Yeah. So yeah, it's safe to say that 2023 wasn't a very good year for movies.
It was a solid year, I'll say, but in terms of the way it was like, but in terms of the outside, yeah, it was not good. It was exhausting. Yeah, I'll give my final 2 cents on this. Yeah, Disney embarrassing themselves in what is considered as their worst year yet, with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Pixar's Elemental becoming, even despite a very rocky start, becoming the only movies to become successful at the box office in 2023, while films like Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania, Haunted Mansion, The Marvels, and The Disastrous Wish flopped hard at the box office. And it was also not a good year if you're a physical media collector, as Best Buy is no longer selling physical media in 2024, which is well, now unfortunately, and with some selected Target and Walmart stores also getting rid of physical media for good, people getting superhero fatigue to the point where, minus Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, films like Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania, Blue Beetle, the Marvels, and the recent Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, and especially the infamous The Flash film, all flopping hard at the box office. But you want to know what's the absolute worst? If you remember back in 2022, I criticized some of the mainstream movies for going over budgeted when it comes to the visual effects, to the point where they absolutely looked atrocious and eye gouging. And sadly, that trend continues in 2020. Continued in 2023, where we had a number, like literally a number of either 100 million or to like $300 million budget movies having some of the most eye gouging and terrible visual effects I've ever seen in a movie in 2023. Yeah, to say this year was not kind for movies would be an understatement. Yeah, oh yeah. Justin Roland, shame on you. Yeah, there were a number of great movies. Now, to be fair, there were a number of great movies that came out in 2023, which Søren and I will mention next time in our best films of 2023 podcast. But like we stated before, there were a number of garbage films that plagued movie theaters in 2023. And today we're going to take a look, and tonight we're going to take a look at 15 of the worst movies that Søren and I saw in 2023. Now, here's a couple things to keep in mind when doing this list, as we both did this list. Okay, so Søren saw a couple movies that I didn't see. There were a couple movies that I didn't see in the that people might have on their worst of list that I didn't see, such as You People, Children of the Corn 2020, the 2020 remake of Children of the Corn, Ghosted, the controversial Peter Pan and Wendy, and Knights of the Zodiac. So don't expect those to be on my list.
What do you mean, You People?
Oh my god. Don't expect Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey to be on my list either, because I had no intention of seeing that movie whatsoever, even though Søren did, and he's going to explain it later on when we get to it. And boy, do I have a choice of words for this director when we get to it too. So we'll get to that when we get to that as soon as we can. And the last but not least, please remember that film is subjective, and that these are the films that Søren and I saw in 2023 that we consider the worst of the worst. And you're allowed to disagree with some of the choices that are on the list. That's totally all right. If you disagree with any of the choices, that's okay. You can like what you like. And also, one last thing I want to get off my chest. There were some people there was some like writers, directors, and some film critics who say that stop making these worst of lists. They're hurting people. They're really hurting people. Guys, these worst of lists exist for a reason. We're not here to. It's to critique like what not to do when making a movie, while also showing that I'm like how this is supposed to be a lesson on what they should do next time, and how they should like do better next time. We're not here to trash anybody that is involved with the film. We're not here to trash actors. We're not here to trash that. We're especially not here to trash the actors. But it's just if we don't do our worst stuff list, How are we going to get better movies? So yeah, don't be knocking us. Don't be knocking us just because we have the movies that you made. You made them, and we absolutely despise. I know movies are hard to make, and if you have made these movies, I'm proud of you. I just wish we would have liked these films. And like I said before, these are supposed to serve as a valuable lesson on what not to do when making films. Are we good on that? 26 years of being on this planet, and already it feels like I'm having to like babysit immature adults who are just out of touch with reality. It's sad. Anyway, why don't we just get on with the list and then oh boy, let's just do this, and let's just do this. Let's just start with this laugh.
All right.
Yeah. All right. Wait a minute. One more time, since it was too bright. Gary Oldman. Let's do this.
All right. Let the games begin.
Let the games begin, motherfuckers. Now,
my dishonorable.
Yeah. Let's go over the dishonorable mentions and then get to the 15 of the worst.
My dishonorable mentions are Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie, The Marvels, hands down the worst Marvel film, Wish, a movie that honestly gets worse the more I think about it, Beau is Afraid, Leo, Transformers Rise of the Beast, Haunted Mansion, The Last Voyage of the Demeter, Dream Scenario, May December, which I felt to be one of the most pretentiously overrated movies I've seen in a long time, Trolls Band Together, a franchise that clearly peaked at the first movie but just didn't hit that spot ever again. Next Goal Wins, proving that Taika Waititi's brand of humor just doesn't work anymore. Saltburn, Marlowe, a tie between Kandahar and 65, two of the most boring action movies that just has little to no action in them. And lastly, Eli Roth's Thanksgiving, which wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it was just not good at the least.
All right. As for my dishonorable mentions, I have 80 for Brady, Magic Mike's Last Dance, Cocaine Bear, Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, Haunted Mansion, The Pope's Exorcist, Silent Night, sorry Søren, Kandahar, Foe, She Came to Me, Transformers.
That's what she said.
I knew you were going to pull that. Transformers Rise of the Beast, a tie between Aquaman and the I don't give a flying fuck kingdom. Thank you, Ethan. And Shazam Fury of the Gods, The Nun 2, Fast X, Wish, Operation Fortune, Ruse de Guerre, Marlowe, Dix the Musical, The Marsh King's Daughter, Paint, The Flash, Trolls Band Together, the worst animated film I've seen this year, without a doubt, Strays, Book Club The Next Chapter, and finally, Søren, you're very lucky that this is not in my top 15 because I hated this movie, Hypnotic.
You dodged a bullet right there, Nick. Now, as always, onto the top 15.
Let's do this. Let's do this, baby. Here comes the boom, motherfuckers!
My number 15 is a pure definition of an unnecessary sequel, Magic Mike's Last Dance. Look, the first two movies weren't that great, so why make another one when you know audiences aren't going to flock over to see it? especially considering that this movie got released, yet Batgirl was shelved and Coyote vs. Acme almost got the boot. This was such a slog to sit through, and it's got the pacing of a foot race between a tortoise and a snail. And once you finally get to see the dance scene at the end, it's just not worth it. And it's certainly not worth sitting through, as Mastermind 3, while not terrible, isn't a good way to kick off the top 15 worst.
My number 15 is the worst superhero film I've seen this year, and without a doubt, the studio's worst film they've done to date, in my opinion. Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania. I didn't think I would see anything that's worse than Thor: Love and Thunder when I saw it last July. But somehow, after seeing Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania last February of 2023, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania is not only my least favorite film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it's also my pick as the worst superhero film of 2023, especially since this is one of those movies that tested my patience with how annoying, idiotic, boring, and downright ugly the whole thing looked. And I really don't want to hate on Marvel, since I've enjoyed a lot of their movies over the years, such as like Spider-Man No Way Home, Avengers Endgame, and my favorite being Black Panther. But unfortunately, this movie also shows on why Marvel Studios has gone downhill after Endgame with the way they release their movies and shows, and why they need to change. The only redeeming aspects I found about the film were that Paul Rudd is once again very good as Scott Lang / Ant-Man. Christoph Bett's musical score was solid, and Bill Pulp's cinematography was great as well. But that's it. That profile pic really says it. Ah! Like literally, I was about to mention that. Like, no joke, folks. This is literally what he looks like. What Modek looks like if Humpty Dumpty fucked Mr. Electric from Shark Boy and Lava Girl, and all of a sudden, this is their offspring. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall, and Humpty Dumpty fucked Mr. Electric. They have a stupid offspring named Modek.
Can she pick her own song?
Shit, another ad.
Oh, no. Even
I hate it when that happens.
Is his head so big? Why is his head so big?
Oh my god. Yeah, I'll talk about the visual effects in a bit, but right now, let's talk about the things that I hated about this movie. Other than the story being a muddled mess and Peyton Reed's directing feeling sloppy, the screenplay by Jeff Loveness was terrible due to it having really bland dialogue, a very inconsistent tone where it can't even decide if it wants to be a superhero film, a comedy film, or a drama film, and the character development feeling so poorly executed, especially including the villain, Kang the Conqueror. My biggest problem I have with the villain is that they try to make him menacing, like how Thanos was, and yet there's no build-up to his character other than he's just a cliche villain you've seen in other films before. And not only did it waste Jonathan Majors, especially given that he was recently fired from the MCU after he was found guilty of 2 misdemeanor counts of assault and harassment in real life, but it also wasted the talents of Michelle Pfeiffer, Michael Douglas, the actress that plays the Wasp, Catherine Newton, Corey Stoll, and even Bill Murray, since they're not given all that much to do in the film. The editing was all over the place. The pacing was a sluggish mess. I also hated the comedy in this movie, since all of it feels very annoying and just juvenile, especially when it feels like a 5-year-old wrote this movie. And not only is the movie filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, but my biggest glaring issue I have with the film are the CGI visual effects. I thought Thor: Love and Thunder had some of the worst CGI effects I've seen in the Marvel Cinematic Universe when I first saw it last July of 2022. But now that I saw Ant-Man Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania and the way the movie's visual CGI effects were executed, I have no regrets when I say that Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania has the absolute worst CGI visual effects I've ever seen in any of the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Not only did most of them look embarrassingly sloppy, but some of them looked unfinished, especially with the way they designed MODOK. Like, you're looking at this, folks. You're looking at the way MODOK was designed right there. And as I stated before, imagine if one of the nursery rhyme characters, Humpty Dumpty, fought Mr. Electric from Shark Boy and Lava Girl. This is their offspring. That's their offspring right there. Excuse me. Yeah, overall, Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania is not only the worst MCU film I've seen so far, but it's also one of the lousiest and most reprehensible films I've seen in 2023, and that's why it pains me to say this, but I'm sorry, but Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania gets the number 15 spot. Marvel Studios, you should be ashamed.
My name is
How can anyone not burst into laughter at that? I can't resist. How can you not burst into laughter?
Yeah, really. Oh my god, I'm all, my face is all red right now. Okay, you're number 14.
Yeah.
Woo!
Number 14 is the worst animated film of the year. Will be Gilman Teenage Kraken. It's already bad enough that Universal basically forgot to promote this movie until only a month in advance. It's already bad enough that after the high standards of the bad guys in Puss in Boots 2, DreamWorks followed it off with this movie. But to have a movie that's not just derivative of other and much better movies like Luca, Turning Red, and The Little Mermaid, and that's just so predictable it's not even funny, but it's also annoying as fuck. Not just in the overabundance of pop songs, but that'll fit right in with Kids Bop, but also with the characters and plot holes the size of whirlpools. So is there any wonder why?
Stupid.
So is there any wonder why people have basically forgotten this movie existed? Because this is among DreamWorks' very worst movies, as well as one of the worst movies of this year. And Jose, yeah, I've heard about that horror movie. Hopefully, it's more funny and campy like the main one, and not shitty and overly serious like. We'll get to that piece of shit later.
Yeah, really, and I have some very stern words for that director too. Once we get to it, so, but we'll get to that when we get to that. All right, number 14. Now, this year has been overall a decent. This has overall been a pretty decent year for horror movies, and we had some good ones. Let's like Megan, Evil Dead Rise, Scream 6, and the surprisingly good Saw X. And there were some great ones like Brandon Cronenberg's Infinity Pool, and my favorite being Talk to Me, which I'll mention later, which I'll mention next time when we do our best films of 2023 list. However, this year was definitely filled with some bad horror films, and the number 14 spot, Insidious: The Red Door, is definitely one of those films. Yep, Insidious: The Red Door is number 14 on the list. Okay. Now, to be fair, I really like the first Insidious movie. Insidious chapters 1 and 3, chapters 2 and 3 were okay. Insidious The Red Door, however, is the worst in the series so far, since this is one of those movies where it feels so repetitive, misguided, and unearned with the way the story of the film was executed, that it becomes nothing more than an absolute waste of time as a result of this. The only redeeming things I found in the film were that Patrick Wilson and Ty Simpkins delivered some very good performances in the film, and the film does have good cinematography as well, but that's it. The story was nothing but a misguided, formulaic, and repetitive mess, especially when in the movie in the third act basically feels like a repeat of the first Insidious movie where they fight the lipstick-faced demon once again. Like, really, guys? Also, it didn't help that the screenplay was written by Scott Teens, and for those of you who don't know, I am not a fan of Scott Teens at all. I cannot stand him. I mean, he was one of the co-writers of the disastrous Halloween Kills from 2021 and the Firestarter remake, which was one of the worst movies I saw from 2022. And oh boy, does he strike again in terms of how awful the screenplay felt. Not only does its dialogue feel so clunky and idiotic, and most of the characterization, minus Dalton and Josh Lambert, feel poorly developed, but just when you thought this Insidious movie series, just when you thought the Insidious movie series couldn't sink any lower, there's this one scene where Dalton, Lambert, and Chris go to a frat college party, and they stumble upon this one guy dressed up as a baby handing out, and I'm not making this up, by the way, samples of diaper pudding. I almost threw up in my mouth when I first
diaper gravy.
Oh god. I almost threw up in my mouth watching that scene because I know it's chocolate, but still, because of how unnecessary, disgusting they looked. It's like if you were to hand out chocolate chip cookies, except the cookies are instead of the cookies being chocolate chip, it's actual human feces. Like, literally. Yeah, pretty disgusting, huh? Also, Patrick Wilson tries his best with the way he directed this movie, but thanks to how horrendous the screenplay felt, all that vision and passion he had behind the camera felt squandered and all over the place. As for the rest of the acting in the film, it's not that great. Rose Byrne, Sinclair Daniel, Hiam Abbas, and Lynn Shay all feel horribly wasted due to how poorly written their characters felt, while I found Peter Dager to be absolutely insufferable as Nick the Dick. Haha, get it? Because Nick rhymes with Dick. With Dick. Oh, fuck me with that shit. On top of that, the musical score was nothing but a repetitive and underwhelming mess. The editing was all over the place. The pacing was a sluggish mess. And the film having its share of cliches that you've seen in other films before. There is also one major issue I have with the film, and that's the movie's jump scares. Like, the jump scares in this movie are so goddamn predictable. You can literally predict every single jump scare coming from a mile away. You might as well have a counter, and it'll be like, 3, 2, 1. Oh, who didn't see that coming? Like, literally. Now, I know that the Insidious movies are known for having jump scares, but when you see a horror movie where you can predict the jump scares coming from a mile away, it becomes nothing more than a boring and repetitive mess as a result of this. And Insidious The Red Door is seriously one of the worst examples of this, since not only does it rely on jump scares for the sake of it, but it also relies on jump scares for the sake of being predictable. And I hate having to repeat myself over and over and over again with this. But if you're going to have jump scares in the movie, use them sparingly by not making the scares predictable and actually build some real tension for once. Yeah, overall, Insidious The Red Door is so far the worst of the Insidious movies and one of the most repetitive, boring, and horribly misguided horror films I've ever seen, and that's why it's number 14 on the list.
Number 13 is a movie I already ranted on, Rebel Moon Part 1. Long story short, if you're gonna rip off one of the most popular sci-fi movies of recent memory, could you at least rip off the soul as well? As is, the characters are so bland I can't even tell you the names of them. The action sequences are nonsense, and with they relying way too much on the 300 slow motion. The music's a bland mess, and even the effects aren't good at the slightest. After this movie, I'm basically done rooting for this franchise, and you won't be seeing me checking out the director's cut because if you're gonna release a movie and right before its release you're like, actually the real cut's coming in, this is just a tech demo, then you basically alienated your audience.
Again, why?
Which is why Rebel Movement's my number 13.
Number 13 is one of the worst romantic comedies I've ever seen in my life. Love Again. This is one of those movies where you can't help but feel baffled at what you just witnessed due to how unbelievably idiotic and absurd the premise of the film felt. Like, and I'll say that for a bit, and how completely predictable and tiresome the outcome of the film turned out to the point where it just becomes nothing more than a complete waste of time. The only redeeming things I found in the film were that Celine Dion actually did a very good job playing herself in the film. And Nick Jonas also gives out a very good performance in his brief cameo appearance. Yes, they also spoiled it in the trailer, by the way. By the way, shut up. And the film does have good cinematography as well, but that's it. The story felt not only predictable, but unbelievably idiotic. Like, why the hell would you make a movie where Mira Ray unintentionally sends a number of romantic messages to her fiance's old cell phone number when it's being reassigned to a different person who doesn't even know her, even after she lost her fiance in a tragic accident? That makes no sense. Makes no sense. I was also very disappointed in the way James C. Strauss directed this movie, since it came off as being nothing more than a muddled mess. And as for the screenplay he wrote for the film, it isn't any better. In fact, it's even worse because of how idiotic and clunky the dialogue felt, and how paper-thin, shallow, and one-dimensional the characters felt. The rest of the acting was terrible. The actress that played Mira Ray felt shallow and lifeless, while San Hugan gives out one of the worst and most bland performances I've seen this entire year as Rob Burns. His American accent he tries to pull in the film didn't sound real at all. And to make matters worse, there's no chemistry between Jones and Hugan whatsoever due to how bad the performances felt and how one-dimensional and shallow the characters felt. On top of the soundtrack being obnoxious, as well as the pacing being a sluggish mess, and the film having bad editing, the humor feeling shoehorned in and pathetic, the film being filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, and the ending feeling both incredibly idiotic and predictable. Those reasons alone are why I found Love Again to be one of the most idiotic and embarrassingly reprehensible romantic comedies I've ever seen, and that's why it is number 13 on the list.
Number 12 is a movie so forgettable and bland that it's not even worth the effort going back and explain. So, simply put, The Mother is my number 12. So, go on.
All right. Number 12. Number 12. Taika Waititi. What the fuck were you thinking? Yeah, Netskull wins. I mean, how could he fuck this up? Netskull Wins is one of the worst sports movies I've ever seen, especially since this is one of those movies where it made me question not only how Taika Waititi could mess up a movie based on a true story of a football team that's considered one of the weakest in the world, But it also made me question if he was even that good in the first place, because other than being yet another paint by the numbers cliche sports biopic that I've seen in other films before, what makes this movie so bad is how it tries way too hard to be funny by also being nothing more than a live action cartoon, and it becomes nothing more than a complete waste of time as a result of this. The only redeeming qualities I have with the film was Michael Fassbender giving out a very good performance as Thomas Rongen, and the film has a very good soundtrack and great cinematography, but that's it. The story was a horribly misguided mess, especially since not only is it the same underdog story we have seen countless and countless of times in other films before, but we don't even get to see the soccer match until the third act. Literally the third act of the film. And not only was I disappointed with the way Taika Waititi directed this movie, since it came out as being nothing more than a muddled mess, but the screenplay that he and Elaine, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name, Mr. Morris wrote for the film was absolutely atrocious. And that's not only due to atrocious dialogue and terrible characterization, but the tone also feeling so inconsistent where it can't even decide if it wants to be a sports drama film or a comedy film. The rest of the acting, especially from Oscar Keightley, Kamana, David Fain, Rachel House, and Bella Cole, I'm sorry if I mispronounced those names, but they were all terrible. And Will Arnett and Elizabeth Moss are horribly wasted in this movie. The editing was all over the place. The pacing was a sluggish mess. Since for a movie that was 103 minutes long, it felt like it was going on for 3 hours. Also, the jokes in this movie are absolutely atrocious. Since it felt like Taika got a preschooler to write this movie, especially since the movie shoehorns in references to the Matrix, and this other one pissed me off to no end. This other reference pissed me off. It was where Michael Fassbender's character confronts the team, and then he says this bullshit. Fixing your hair like My Little Pony. I can't make shit like this up. Honestly, I think it's worse. I know I might get some disagreements, but okay, maybe not worse, but this is on the same level. This is on the same level as that film. Yeah, Matrix and My Little Pony. Referenced in a Taika Waititi film. Just why? And not only is the movie filled with cliches that you've seen and done better in other films before, but even when we get to the soccer match in the third act, it's not exciting because of how predictable it felt. Of course the losing team will win the game. We already knew that. It's not a spoiler it's not a spoiler by the way. It's not a spoiler by the way. We already knew the losing team was going to win the game. We already knew that. Overall, not only is Next Goal Wins one of the worst sports movies I've ever seen, but it is also one of the most idiotic and brutally unfunny films I've seen in 2023. And those reasons alone are why I not only consider Next Goal Wins to be Taika Waititi's worst movie he's made so far, but also why it's number 12 on my list. Taika Waititi, I love you, dude, but there was no excuse for you to make the movie this bad. You ought to be ashamed of yourself.
You know, out of Disney's trend of live-action remakes, this to me is one of the only bad sides, and that's Peter Pan and Wendy. A movie so talent-sucking that not even David Lowery can put enough heart and soul into this one. From the visuals alone, you can tell that he wanted to make this Neverland adventure whimsical and enchanting, but it doesn't work if the set design is only as bland and colorless as his characters. Pierre is made into a wimp, Wendy's made into a bland female protagonist, and what they did to Captain Hook is the most insulting thing since whatever Garrett Hudlin's performance was in Pan. You know it's bad when this movie is overshadowed by the genuine okayness of The Little Mermaid, and that makes it worthy of the number 11 spot.
All right, number 11 on my list. Number 11 on my list. My mom, like, my mom made me go see this in theaters. And Mom, if you're watching this, just take this as a joke. Just take this as a joke. It's not intentional. Just take it. But this was what was going through my head after I saw this. Let me find it. This is why I feel like, okay, I don't want to mention my mom. I'm sorry. I cannot believe I saw this in theaters. And let me tell you, this is why I feel like saying to the filmmakers, hold on. All right, there it is.
Bonfire!
Hold on.
I will never forgive you!
Like, literally. Number 11 is Mafia Mama. I cannot even begin to describe how much I absolutely detest every single minute of Mafia Mama, because not only is it one of the lousiest and most cliched, idiotic, and obnoxious movies I've seen this entire year, but this is also a perfect example of a movie wasting its own concept that could have been a funny movie, but in reality, it's nothing but an exercise of appealing to one demographic while also trying way too hard to be funny. The only redeeming things I found in the film were that Monica Bellucci was the only actress in the film that actually gives out a very good performance. The cinematography was very good, and I only laughed 3 times throughout. As there were 10% of the jokes, which also included 2 pieces of dialogue, like, "Is that a cannoli in your pocket?" And yeah, and I'm still like a virgin. That actually caught me off guard and made me laugh, but otherwise, that's it. There was nothing else that I liked about the film. The story was such a misguided mess, as it clearly doesn't know what it wants to tell. Does it want to be a dark action comedy where it also spoofs the cliches of the mob movie genre, or does it want to be a cliched midlife crisis movie where Toni Collette's character is facing that after her son leaves for college and she catches her husband having an affair with a younger woman, and her bosses treat her like she's a piece of shit? We don't know because the movie can't even decide what it wants to be whatsoever. The screenplay was atrocious, and that's mainly due to how, minus Monica Bellucci's character, every single character in this movie are nothing but obnoxious, paper-thin, and one-dimensional idiots who you can't stand whatsoever. And minus the 2 witty dialogues I mentioned and my positives, as well as its minus the two witty dialogues, as I mentioned, in my positives, as well as the tone being very inconsistent, where it can't even decide if it wants to be an action movie or a comedy movie. Also, it doesn't help that this is from the director of Twilight, Red Riding Hood, and Miss Bala, because, my God, the directing in the film is nothing but about a mess.
And this is the same director as the Nativity Story. What the hell happened, man?
And what the hell? And 13. Like, what the hell happened? Also to my mother watching this. again, it's just a joke. I love you very much, and I thank you for everything that you've done for my brother and I for the past like almost 30 years. We love you. Anyway, as I was saying, the rest of the acting was atrocious. I love Toni Collette, but I feel she's one of the most talented actresses working today, and she should have been nominated for Best Actress for Hereditary. But I don't know what the hell happened here, since she gives out one of the most annoying performances I've seen this entire year as Kristen. The soundtrack was obnoxious. The editing was all over the place. Not to mention that this is one of the most poorly paced movies I've seen this year. Since for a movie that's 101 minutes long, it felt like it was going on for 3 fucking hours. The action sequences aren't that exciting. And even the action sequences aren't that exciting. Sure, it's decently choreographed, but they're an absolute mess due to how shaky and poorly edited they felt. Also, not only is the movie filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, as well as done better, but the biggest fatal flaw I have with the film is that as a comedy, it's not funny. It's not funny. 90% of the jokes come across as being juvenile and idiotic, including this one scene that completely angered me. And you know what? I actually almost walked out. This scene almost caused me to walk out. Almost caused me to walk out of the theater. And it was where Toni Collette's character, Kristen, is being attacked by this one gunman who spotted her while talking to her bosses in a video chat, and they're too busy to notice her being attacked because they're looking at sexual things. And yet, after she finally attacked the gunman and killed him, her boss immediately fires Kristen because he thought she was drunk, even though he and the other bosses were too busy to notice that Kristen was being attacked and nearly was about to be raped by the gunman just because they were looking at sexual images, including butts, on the fucking internet. I seriously want to know what the writers were thinking when they thought of writing and cooking up that crap. Because not only did it drag on and on and on, but the fact that scene was played for laughs in such an immature manner disgusted me to no end. They ought to be ashamed of themselves. Overall, Mafia Mama is one of the lousiest and most cliched, idiotic, and obnoxious movies I've seen this entire year. And the fact that I saw 10 movies this year that were worse than Mafia Mama shows on how bad the next 10 films are. So, Mafia Mama, you are very lucky you're not in the top 10. But I hate you regardless. That's why it's number 11.
Number 10 is this year's Jurassic World Dominion, that being Exorcist. Dominion. Exorcist the Believer. Exorcist Believer, I mean. Now, making a sequel to a beloved icon isn't anything new. Hell, I say this is way better than Exorcist Heretic, and especially Exorcist the Beginning, which is one of the worst movies ever made. Regardless, the only thing worse than making an Exorcist movie, a generic Exorcist movie, long after the series has gone out of fashion, is making Ellen Burstyn about as useful as a used tampon.
Oh my god.
Seriously, why the fuck was she in this movie? And the ending where they basically ripped off The Dark Knight and basically guilt-tripped Linda Blair into appearing at the very end. This is a franchise that has become a hush of itself at this point, which is why it's my number 10.
And I will rant about that in a little bit. Because, oh man, I have a lot to talk about with this. Alright, number 10. The number 10 spot on the list. I know I'm gonna piss off this fan base, but this shows on why this fan base is so toxic at this point. Number 10, Five Nights at Freddy's. I can already.
They say that breakfast is the most important meal of the day, but that's just a theory. Fuck you.
Like, really? And I know some fans are some fans watching right now are going, oh, you suck for hating this movie. You have to play the games to understand the movie. What is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? You ass! Number one, as I stated before, it's my list. And number two, you don't have to agree with everything I say, but please understand where I'm coming from and why this movie is on the list. Thank you. Anyway, not only is Five Nights at Freddy's one of the worst movies based on a video game I've ever seen, but it's also one of the most idiotic, cynical, cliched, boring, meandering, and reprehensible horror films I've ever seen in my entire life. Especially since this is one of those movies where you can't help but feel like it was made just to please the fans of the source material. And that wouldn't be a bad thing, except unlike Ghostbusters Afterlife, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Top Gun Maverick, where yes, they had its share of fan service in it, but also told a consistent and engaging story for the audiences to get invested in, as well as characters that feel well-developed and either real or relatable. Five Nights at Freddy's doesn't care about any of those whatsoever and just wants to cram in as much fan service as possible for the sake of being fan service. And it becomes nothing more than a gigantic waste of time as a result of this. The only redeeming thing I found in the film was the animatronics. The fact that Jim Henson's Creature Shop were behind with the way that they designed and worked on the animatronic mascots like Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy, and Mr. Cupcake, it's nothing short of outstanding. And since they're exactly like how they looked in the games, and I have to applaud the people behind that. They did a wonderful job with the way they designed them. Unfortunately, that's the only positive I have with the film. Everything else in this movie was just downright horrendous. From its story feeling nothing but misguided and incoherent, especially since the subplot involving child custody, which is supposed to be Mike Schmidt's character arc, felt like it went absolutely nowhere. And not only do I find Emma Tammy's directing to be a muddled mess, but the screenplay that she, as well as the creator of the game, Scott Cawthon, and Seth Cotterback wrote for the film was horrendous. And that's not only due to its dialogue being a clunky mess, but also the tone feeling so inconsistent where it can't even decide if it wants to be a horror film or a comedy film. And to make matters worse, the characters feel paper thin, cliched, one-dimensional, and some are just straight up unlikable, including Mike Schmidt, who is hands down one of the worst and most idiotic characters I've ever seen in a movie this entire year. Like if you were really gonna set his character up as being this great character, great and relatable character, maybe it's best you don't have him fall asleep on the job like a few times throughout, and as well as him being an immature dick. Just saying. The acting was not that great. Josh Hutcherson is so bad in this movie. While Elizabeth Lail, Matthew Lillard, and Mary Stuart Masterson are all horribly wasted in this movie as well. The soundtrack was terrible. The cinematography felt dull and bleak. The editing was all over the place. And worst of all, this movie is just not that scary, especially due to how lackluster the jump scares felt. There's not a lot of jump scares in it, but even when there is, it's just so lackluster. The humor they try to throw in the film felt idiotic and shoehorned in. And not only does the film have its share of cliches that you've seen in other films before, you've not only seen but also done better in other films before, but I also found the twist involving Matthew Lillard's character to be absolutely idiotic and just predictable. I mean, who could have predicted Matthew Lillard's character being the villain the entire time? Who could have predicted it? Yeah, that's what I thought. Overall, while it's not the worst horror film I've seen this year, Five Nights at Freddy's is nevertheless one of the worst video game-based movies I've ever seen. And that's why it's number 10 on the list. Also, one last thing. If you like the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, I'm happy that you enjoyed it. I just wish I was on board with you. I just wish I was on the same boat as you guys. And with that out of the way, let's just... Now, just... Please, one last time. Art is subjective, and we should respect opinions. Okay? With that out of the way, let's just move on to number 9.
My number 9 is a movie I like to call Dick Joke the Movie, that being Biosphere. I'm not kidding when I say this movie is just one joke spread throughout an hour 45. A guy's dick falls up and he grows a vagina. There, just spoiled the entire movie for you. Not that it matters because this movie is just a bore to sit through. All these two dinguses do is walk all over the place, argue, and contemplate the future of humanity. Riveting, huh? I'm sure you've never heard about this movie, and after this, it's best if you continue not hearing about this movie, hence the number 9 spot.
That is so stupid, the way they set that up. Number 9 is 65. How could the motherfucking writers of A Quiet Place screw something like this up? 65 is one of those movies where its concept, which could have been a very good mix of Jurassic Park meets The Last of Us, gets stranded due to how poorly structured, misguided, and lifeless the whole thing felt. And that's too bad because the idea is there, but when the film story is so poorly structured and poorly executed, and the characters feel boring and lifeless, then you have a movie that is nothing more than a missed opportunity. And that's what 65 unfortunately is. After seeing the movie, I kept asking this in my head. How do they mess up a concept like this and make the movie this boring and lifeless? The only redeeming thing in the film was that Adam Driver and Ariana Greenblatt delivered some good performances as Mills and Koa respectively. Otherwise, no. The story was nothing more than an uninspired and poorly structured mess, especially when it's literally this throughout the entire movie. I'm not kidding. Exposition, dinosaur action sequence. Exposition, dinosaur action sequence. Exposition, dinosaur action sequence. Exposition, dinosaur action sequence. We go home. Like, that's literally the entire structure of the film. No good storytelling, nor any good character development whatsoever. And it didn't help that both the writing and directing by Scott Beck and Brian Woods were downright atrocious as well. The musical score felt dull and shallow. The cinematography was a dull mess, especially in terms of its color palettes. The editing was all over the place. Not to mention that this is one of the most poorly paced movies I've seen in 2023. Since for a movie that's 90 minutes long, it felt like it was going on for 3 hours. And not only was the ending such an underwhelming mess, but there are 2 glaring issues I have with the film. Number 1, even when the movie cuts to the dinosaur action sequences, they're not that exciting or entertaining due to the lack of tension these sequences had and due to how poorly edited and shot they felt. And number 2, this movie has some of the worst visual effects I've ever seen in a movie this entire year. Not only were the dinosaurs poorly done, not only were they poorly done in terms of the way the dinosaurs were designed in CGI, but the CGI felt so sloppy that they looked like they came out of the early 2000s. That's how bad and dated the CGI visual effects looked in the film. Overall, 65 is one of the most boring, lifeless, and reprehensible movies I've seen this year, and that's why it is number 9 on the list.
Number 8 is one of 2 movies by Guy Ritchie, and it's safe to say he hit both sides of the spectrum this year. He made The Covenant, which was great, but then he also made a shitty movie called Operation Fortune. This was not worth delaying an entire year just to say irrelevant, as the story is both all over the place and boring to sit through, as there's little to no action seen throughout, and even if there is, it's so shillily executed that it just wastes your time. The actors do their best, but it's unwarranted if the characters are blander than moldy cheese on rice cakes.
Yeah, really.
Let's just hope his next movie fares out better, as this was such a stain in his career, and my number 8.
And now we get to the 8 movies that I gave a 0 out of 10. Yep. The 8 movies I gave a 0 out of 10 to. And coming in at number 8 was the first movie I gave a 0 out of 10 to in 2023. House Party 2023. Yep, you knew this was going to be on the list. The original House Party is one of my favorite comedies from the 1990s. House Party 2023, on the other hand, is one of the worst remakes / reboots I've ever seen, and one of the worst comedies I've ever seen in general, too. It is a movie that clearly has no idea who it's even for or what it wants to be, and it's nothing but a huge waste of time as a result of this. There was nothing redeeming in this movie whatsoever other than this one scene that did make me chuckle, where one of the partygoers accidentally falls into the cracked tile of the floor, and another partygoer says, "Well, you know he did." That was actually funny. Other than that, the story felt all over the place. And the sad thing is, it wasn't even that bad at first, when it was about the two main characters, Kevin and Damon, wanting to throw a house party at LeBron James's mansion, until you realize that the movie all of a sudden abandons its plot involving a house party in the third act, and instead focuses on this subplot where Kevin and Damon and Kid Cudi, yes, that Kid Cudi, I'm not making this up, go to an adult Illuminati to find LeBron James's ring after it was stolen. Not only does it feel out of place, but you also can't help but realize that this movie all of a sudden forgot it was even about a house party. Worst of all, you can't help but feel like this movie was basically made as an excuse for LeBron James to inflate his ego and show off his own mansion, as well as call his friends to come and be in the film as a result of this. Especially with how many cameos are thrown in the film. Whether it's rappers like Kid Cudi, Lil Wayne, Gata, Snoop Dogg, Juvenile, and Chauncey Hitboy Hollis, or sports figures like Tristan Thompson, Odell Beckham Jr., Anthony Davis, and even LeBron himself. Oh yeah, and speaking of which, did I forget to mention that LeBron James produced this movie? What does that tell you? In the words of Jay Sherman from The Critic, it states. Yeah, he did. He did. And I still refuse to see that to this day. Now, that's another film I forgot to mention that I still refuse to see to this day that some people have on their worst of list. Thank you for mentioning that, Søren. Also, the screenplay was atrocious due to it having terrible dialogue and characters that come across as being beyond unlikable, shallow, and poorly developed, especially the main characters, Kevin and Damon. You see, what made the original House Party work with its character development was that the characters, including the main characters played by Christopher Reed and Christopher Martin, Kid and Play, were in high school, and they felt real and relatable as a result of this. Since it, like I stated before, it reminds you of your days in high school with friends. That's why the original worked so well. But when you have the main characters in the remake / reboot, Kevin and Damon, be grown-ass adults who want to throw a party despite the fact that they're getting fired from their jobs and they're this unlikable, that's not relatable. That's just bad character writing, since Kevin and Damon in this movie are unlikable just for the sake of it. And aside from that, the rest of the characters in the remake and reboot of House Party aren't any better either. You don't give a rat's ass about any of the other characters since the rest of them feel obnoxious, shallow, and unlikable as well. Also, nearly every single joke in the film could be described in these following words: juvenile, idiotic, and reprehensible. Aside from the film having idiotic one-liners, as well as overusing its crass, gross-out jokes, it features some, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, it features some shoehorn-in political jokes involving the Black Lives Matter movement and Donald Trump. Look, I fucking hate the guy too, but leave the political bullshit out of movies like this. For fuck's sake. And worst of all, this movie also has this idiotic running gag involving a koala getting high with other partygoers, and then all of a sudden starts attacking other partygoers as a result of this. And even though the koala in the film is really a fake replica and not the real thing, the special effects used on that thing looked absolutely atrocious. The acting was terrible, and so was the directing in the film. Poor Toslin Cole and Jacob Lattimore both feel horribly wasted in this movie due to how poorly written their characters felt, and how there wasn't any good chemistry between these two actors whatsoever. The soundtrack was terrible. It sluggishly paced throughout, and what baffled me the most was how atrocious the cinematography and editing in this movie looked. While the cinematography was nothing more than a shaky and dull mess, especially in terms of its lighting and color palettes, the way it was edited looked like something that was made for TV. And it's then when you realize that this movie was originally going to go straight to streaming on HBO Max, but what did Warner Brothers decide to do at the last minute? Dump this in theaters from last January. Yeah, this honestly explains why the cinematography and editing ended up looking like that. Overall, House Party 2023 is one of the worst reboots and remakes I've ever seen in my entire life, and one of the worst comedies I've seen in general too. And that's why it is number 8 on the list. Fuck this movie. And also, fuck you, LeBron James. Fuck you.
First Space Jam 2, and now this.
Seriously.
You know, Bruce Willis has led such a beloved and versatile career at first. But for the past decade, he's been stuck doing these DVD action movies he only did to pay his medical bills. Which leads to his last movie, which happened to be my number 7, Assassin. Apparently, the director saw Brian Cronenberg's Possession and thought, you know what would make it even better? What if I took out all the blood, gore, and sex and made it a PG-13 movie masquerading as an R-rated movie? Not good enough? I could also replace the characters with literal blank slates, like you could practically see the stilt at the back of them, and I could direct the ideas of a Christopher Nolan movie with the bites of a Geico commercial.
Fuck?
That's pretty much this movie, and it's pretty much my number 7.
What the fucking hell, man? What?
It's safe to say you're not missing shit, Nick.
I'm literally like, what? I think I just lost a few brain cells from hearing this. Anyway, moving on to number 7. Number 7, another comedy on the list. Another comedy on the list. And oh my god, this is bad. This is bad. Number 7 is about my father. This was literally one of the toughest movies I've ever had to sit through in 2023. And that's mainly due to how cliched, predictable, juvenile, idiotic, and completely unfunny about my father felt. And it shows why Sebastian Maniscalco, even despite the fact how much I like him and how much of a good actor he is, just cannot do comedy. I mean, it was obvious that it was based on one of his stand-up routines, and I am not a fan of his stand-up routines at all. He's like this annoying kid. He's like this annoying kid who you don't want to be around because of how obnoxious he is. That's the best way I would describe his stand-up routine in a nutshell. Except honestly, I would rather watch his stand-up routine than watch anything in this piece of shit ever again. And since I couldn't find anything redeeming about the film, let's talk about everything I hated about this movie. The story was nothing but a predictable mess because this is one of those been there, done that stories that comes across as being extremely predictable, and it just leaves you feeling bored when you already know what the outcome of the film is going to be. Of course, you know that Sebastian and his father are going to make up at the end of the film, even despite how much they were arguing and bickering throughout the entire thing. And you know that Sebastian and his fiancée Ellie, played by Leslie Bibb, are going to be back together and propose. Are going to get back together and propose after their conflicts early on in the film. And I hope you like Sebastian narrating throughout the entire film, like he's trying to be like Ray Liotta's character, Henry Hill in Goodfellas, because that's literally what he does throughout the entire thing. And it's nothing but Sebastian's character pumping out exposition as a result of this. This is the type of filmmaking and writing I hate the most, because by throwing so much exposition, the movie treats its audience like they're idiots, and they're not going to get what's going on, even though we already know throughout. You didn't need to have Sebastian narrate the entire film while also dumping exposition on us. Oh no, Dirty Grandpa is worse. It's still worse. But that doesn't make this movie any better. The screenplay was atrocious, due to it having such atrocious dialogue, such as, "Hey, Seabass, say hi to TikTok." And this new haircut is giving me like G.I. Jane 2 months out of boot camp.
Just go on. I'll go find the clip.
Okay. And as if the screenplay couldn't get any more atrocious, not only is the film's tone absolutely atrocious, since it can't even decide. Not only is the film's tone an absolute mess, since it can't even decide if it wants to be a comedy or a family drama flick, but you don't care about any of the characters throughout the film, since all of them are nothing but obnoxious, paper-thin, and one-dimensional idiots, especially the character of Lucky, played by Anders Holm, who may just be one of the worst and most annoying characters I've ever seen in the movie this entire year. He was so annoying that it just makes you want to go up to the screen and punch this fucking asshole in the face. Also, who the hell names the woman character, who's a politician, by the way, Tigger? Yes, I'm not kidding. The politician woman has the exact same name as one of the characters from Winnie the Pooh. Oh my God. And minus one scene that made me laugh, where Sebastian smashed the tennis ball back to Lucky, only for it to accidentally hit him in the testicles. 99.5% of the jokes throughout the entirety of About My Father are absolutely atrocious, especially since some appeal to the lowest common denominator in the worst way possible. One was this overlong juvenile joke where Sebastian's pants fall down and his butt and his ass and crotch is shown after losing his swim trunks while riding a hoverboard in the water because Sebastian's got such a hairy ass. I'm too old for this shit. And the other joke that made me cringe and angered me to no end was where one night during dinner, Sebastian and Ellie start to hook up outside when Sebastian sees peacock feathers in the garbage, meaning Salvo killed and cooked one of the family's prized pet peacocks.
And here's what I have to say about that G.I. Jane scene.
The peacock scene. The peacock scene.
And here's what I have to say about the peacock scene.
Are you kidding me? I know you're evil and everything, but you hurt a teensy little harmless firefly? Really? Like you're just a great big meanie!
Like,
There! I said it!
literally!
What makes you think you're so special? Like the rules that call a courtesy don't apply to you? You're the different ones supporting your
Like, literally! Literally! And yeah, I would too. That scene was idiotic on so many levels, but at least the crane wasn't caught. God, I don't think it's funny at all. This joke not only angered me, but it also caused me to walk out. I don't think it's funny at all to put a scene where Salvo murders and cooks the peacock and feeds it to the family. And the fact it's said to be done as a sacrifice is something I found completely pathetic. On top of the directing being all over the place, the acting was also atrocious. Sebastian Maniscalco and Anders Holm are both insufferable and obnoxious in this movie, and it wastes the talents of Robert De Niro, Leslie Bibb, David Resch, and Kim Cattrall. The soundtrack annoyed the shit out of me. Both the cinematography and editing are atrocious since they look like made-for-TV garbage. The pacing was a sluggish mess since for a movie that's 90 minutes long, it felt like it was going on for 3 hours. And not only is the movie filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, but the ending was so goddamn predictable, and it's so sappy and corny to the point where you can't help but wonder if you're really watching a movie that came from the Hallmark Channel. Like, literally. Overall, About My Father is one of the most cynical, juvenile, idiotic, and downright predictable comedy films I've ever seen in my entire life. It's a movie that's filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, and has no heart whatsoever. And that's why it is number 7 on the list. Fuck this movie.
For my number 6, I have one line that perfectly describes it all. Love is love. Yeah, but sticks the musical. What a complete disaster this was. From the annoying main characters, whom I like to call Diet Stone and Diet Parker, to the songs that made me want to stab my ears out with salad forks. And the only thing worse than a running joke involving the mother's vagina falling off and coming to life on its own is an ending that literally promotes incest and makes me want to apologize for passing the ending to Exorcist Believer. and that alone warrants the number 6 spot.
Like, seriously, did these people behind this movie know that incest is illegal and immoral? And love is love. Fuck you with that shit. Number 6 on my list. I really liked the first film. The second film was one of the worst movies I saw from 2016. And yet, 7 years later, they made a movie that is not only the worst of the movies, but one of the worst of the year, too. And it's My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. This is yet another one of those movies where you can't help but feel like this movie was just made just for the actors to go on a vacation. Now, I wouldn't have a problem with it if they told an interesting, compelling story. Unfortunately, it's not. And since I couldn't find anything redeeming about the film, I might as well discuss everything wrong with it. The story is nothing but an absolute joke, since it's a bunch of random subplots or a series of unfortunate events that lead to nowhere. The acting, although not terrible, wasn't that great. Since not only does it feel like Nia Vardalos, John Corbett, Louis Mandler, Andrea Martin, Joey Fatone, and the rest feel like they were phoning in their performances. But Elias Kakarvas, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, but he gives out one of the worst performances I've seen this entire year as Aristotle. And that's mainly due to how obnoxious he felt throughout. On top of Nia Vardalos doing a very poor job with the way she wrote and directed this movie, as well as the soundtrack being a generic mess, the pacing being all over the place, as well as the movie being filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before. This movie also has some of the worst cinematography and editing I've seen in a movie in 2023 because how it was shot and edited looked like something that was made for TV. And not only did I find every single joke in My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 to be obnoxious, juvenile, and idiotic, but if you were expecting the movie to at least have some heart in it, well, I'm sorry to tell you, there was no heart or charm in this movie in it whatsoever. And even when there is, it feels so cliched and sappy to the point where it feels like you're watching a made-for-TV Hallmark movie. Also, this is a minor nitpick, but I know this is a minor nitpick, but this needs to be said. Why the fuck is it called My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3? The story of the film is about the reunion set in Greece rather than the wedding itself. Why not call it My Big Fat Greek Wedding Reunion? Yeah, it wouldn't make any sense to not call it, to not have the number 3, to not have the number 3 in the title, but
if American Pie can do it, why not this?
Exactly. Yeah, and what I was about to say is that it seems more logical. It's the more logical title than My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3. Yeah, overall, My Big Fat Greek Wedding 3 is one of the laziest and most shamelessly cynical, boring, idiotic, and annoying films I've seen this entire year, and that's why it is number 6 on my list.
Number five is a
Now we're in the top 5, guys. We're in the top 5, and oh boy, this is gonna be a real doozy. Anyway,
number 5 is a movie where a ton of people seem to really like this movie, but a group of friends of mine deemed it overrated, and unfortunately, I'm on the latter. Number 5 is Cocaine Bear.
Yeah, sorry, I did not like this movie at all either.
Look, I get this movie isn't meant to be taken seriously, but that excuse means nothing if it's not funny or endearing at the slightest.
Exactly, and if it didn't drag this on and on and on.
This movie tries way too hard to be funny with its wacky shenanigans and characters, but they're more annoying than anything. The bear didn't even look that convincing. It looked like something you'd find at a CW. And how did Elizabeth Banks see this true story about a bear who succumbs to a bunch of drug cocaine and make it so that instead it makes the bear into this mindless killing machine who somehow comes back to life after a 40-foot fall. Seriously, that's an actual scene in the movie.
Like, and to me, that felt exploitative. It felt just as exploitative, actually even more exploitative than Blonde exploiting Marilyn Monroe's abuse.
So it's safe to say that I just don't get this kind of humor, hence Cocaine Bear is my number 5.
Number 5 on my list. I was not looking forward to talking about this. Liam Neeson. What are you doing? And why are you continuing to damage your reputation by being in these shitty and generic action movies where they try way too hard to be like Taken? You were in great movies like Schindler's List.
That's my number 4 as well.
You were in great movies like Schindler's List, as well as Rob Roy. Yeah, Retribution is my number 5 and Søren's number 4. And since we're one apart from another, we might as well talk about it.
It's really bad enough that this movie had to be the poor man's version of Taken meets Speed. But it's even worse when the characters aren't the least bit likable or charismatic, the paces is a sluggish mess, or the story not making any sense by the time the end twist is revealed and it doesn't even have an ending. I just hope Liam Neeson has learned his lesson by the time next year's Saints and Sinners comes out, because otherwise Retribution is my number 4.
Okay, so not only is Retribution yet another one of those movies where excuse me, it's nothing more than a pathetic Taken wannabe, especially given the fact that Liam Neeson is in it. But this is also one of the ugliest and most reprehensible action movies I've ever seen as well. And that's mainly in terms of the way it's shot and the way it's executed. And it's also one of those movies where you're feeling so bored and appalled while watching it, given how repetitive the whole film feels and how ugly the film looks as well. Other than the story being nothing more than a repetitive mess, since you could clearly tell that this movie's trying way too hard to be like Taken, the screenplay felt cliched and messy as hell. Nimrod Antel tries his best with the way he directed this movie, but thanks to the awful repetitive screenplay, it comes across as being nothing more than a muddled mess. The acting was terrible. Liam Neeson once again gives out such a bland performance as Matt Turner, and it's not only because of how cliche his character felt, but it's also because he looks like he was sleepwalking throughout the entire film. I was also very shocked at how terrible Matthew Modine was in this movie as Anders Muller, especially given how he made a comeback in Oppenheimer, which came out which Oppenheimer came out a month before Retribution. Like, dude. Embeth Devitz, Lily Espel, and Jack Champion all feel so horribly wasted in this movie due to how poorly written their characters felt. The musical score absolutely sucked, since it's nothing more than a scrambled mess of noisy chaos. And when it comes to the action sequences in the film, they're sadly not that exciting, mainly due to how much of a shaky mess the cinematography felt, and how much of a choppy mess the editing felt, and how the tension in those action sequences feel non-existent. Excuse me. Not to mention, this is one of the most poorly paced movies I've seen this entire year. Since for a movie that's 90 minutes long, the pacing was such a sluggish mess that it felt like it was going on for 2.5 hours. And not only is the movie filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, but there are 2 major issues I have with the film. Number 1, the twist where Matthew Modine's character, Anders Muller, is revealed to be the bomber all along felt so predictable. And his reasoning for all of this, where he wanted to make Matt a fall guy for the series of bombings to cover up his scheme of embezzling the $208 million 208 million wired into his crypto account felt completely asinine. And number two, it has one of the worst endings I've seen in 2023 due to how abrupt it felt. And what I mean by this is that during the end credits, with no ounce of footage whatsoever, the movie tells us through the news report that the bombings were part of the heist perpetrated by Anders, and how Matt is cooperating with the Europol to resolve this incident. Like, did anybody making this movie even know the term show don't tell? Overall, Retribution is one of the ugliest and most reprehensible and repetitive action movies I've seen in quite some time, and that's why it's number 5 on the list. And since Søren mentioned his number 4, I might as well mention my number 4 as well. Number 4 on my list. Now, I did see the first movie back in 2018, and while it wasn't horrible, and while I didn't like the film, it wasn't exactly horrible. The sequel, on the other hand, is number 4, Meg 2, The Trench.
I'm not saying a fucking word here.
Meg 2, The Trench is one of the worst and most unnecessary, cliche, and reprehensible sequels I've ever seen in my entire life, since this is one of those movies where not only does it rely so much on cliches that you've seen in other films before, but it also insults your intelligence with how idiotic and nonsensical the whole film felt that you leave feeling stupid and angry and appalled at what you just witnessed by the time it's over. There is nothing redeeming in this movie whatsoever, since there are so many things wrong with this movie that I don't even know where to start. Well, first off, the story was such a horribly misguided mess, since nearly 2/3 of the film is nothing but characters voyaging through the trench, and it gets boring real quick due to the film not only ripping off some elements from James Cameron's The Abyss, but due to how much filler is in it as well. Second, the screenplay is absolutely terrible, one of the worst of the year, due to not only its atrocious dialogue, as well as characters feeling paper thin and one-dimensional, but the tone was so inconsistent where it can't even decide if it wants to be a thriller movie, a sci-fi movie, or an action movie. And it also relies way too much on exposition, which really tested my patience to no end. And on top of Ben Wheatley's directing feeling all over the place, as well as the pacing being nothing more than a sluggish mess, and the movie having a share of cliches that you've seen in other films before, the acting was also atrocious. Jason Statham was terrible in this movie as Jonas Taylor, since all the charm he had in the first film is gone due to how lifeless he felt. And it doesn't help that that it looked like he didn't even want to be there. Harry Gregson Williams' musical score was awful, since once again, this is nothing but a scrambled mess of noisy chaos. Also, the action sequences and the shark attack in the third act are terrible due to how much of a... I can't believe I have to do this again. Mainly due to not only how much of a shaky mess the cinematography felt, and how much of a choppy, messy editing also felt, but also due to how awful the visual effects looked. Not only do the Megalodon sharks, as well as the dinosaurs, lizard-like creatures, and a giant squid all look terrible, since they look like something you would find in an outdated PS3 game, but some of the visual effects in this movie looks absolutely unfinished. How this movie cost around $129 million to $139 million to make, yet has some horrendous and sloppy CGI visual effects, is beyond me. Yeah, really. The only more unnerving than this picture is that my esteemed colleague across the screen, so wise so often, is one of the only critics in America who recommended Meg 2, The Trench. You know who you are. Just kidding. Yeah, it is. Honestly. Yeah, overall, not only is Meg 2 The Trench one of the worst and most unnecessary sequels I've ever seen, but it is also one of the most idiotic, cliche, and reprehensible movies I've seen this entire year as well. And that's why Meg 2 The Trench is number 4.
My number 3 is a movie that's already been mentioned, and that's Five Nights at Freddy's. Like I said before, I don't give a rat's ass about what the fans say about me not playing the games, because as is, it's a complete disaster from start to finish. Literally, the only thing that's noteworthy are the animatronics, and even then, they're basically a subplot of their own movie. It follows the Bayformers route in that it takes the focus away from the title characters and makes you sympathize with these human characters that are even less likable than Shia LaBeouf and Mark Wahlberg combined.
Yeah, really.
They're either stupid, annoying, or some combination of the two. The pacing's all over the place. Martha Willard was completely wasted, and I still can't get over how they guilt trip Pat to make a cameo in this.
Yeah, really.
This was clearly not worth releasing in theaters, as this should have just stayed as a streaming exclusive. But that wouldn't change the fact that Five Nights at Freddy's is my number 3.
Also, that throw you did when we first reviewed it on our podcast, that was hysterical. I still love that. All right, number 3, and I know Søren has this on his list, and he's gonna probably like join me on this one since I'm willing to bet it's his number 2. And this franchise I have not been a fan of. I did not like the first film. The second film was really good, and it was a huge improvement over the first film. The third film, I did not like it at all. This one makes the third film look like Mad Max Fury Road. Yeah, number 3 is Expendables 4. Expendables,
which is my number 2. Man, you want to talk too little, too late? Look, if you're gonna make a sequel almost a decade after the last one, the least you could do is put some effort into it. As is, literally the only person who seems to care on screen is Jason Statham, and even then he couldn't save a cast that's either bored, wasted, or Megan Fox. The action and special effects are obnoxious, the story's practically non-existent, and it just made me want to apologize for shitting on the first movie, because at least the first movie had a little bit of charm. This movie doesn't even have that, which is why it's a close second as my number 2 worst film of the year.
Yeah, and to give out my 2 cents for the film, to say this is one of the worst, to say it's not only the worst of the movies, but also one of the worst action movies I've seen in my entire life would be a huge understatement, since this is one of those movies where not only does it feel like it came out way too late, but as you're watching the film, you also feel like it should have gone either straight to the video or straight to streaming due to how ugly and reprehensible the whole thing looked, mainly in terms of its action and visuals, and it becomes nothing more than an absolute waste of time as a result of this. And since I couldn't find anything redeeming about the film, let's talk about the reasons why this one sucked balls. Number 1, when I say that the screenplay is abysmal and one of the very worst of 2023, I really mean it, because the dialogue in this movie is some of the absolute worst I've ever heard in a movie this entire year, especially with how idiotic does a pulp dude, oh my god, I can't believe I'm about to say this. There's a pulp shit in the woods line felt. Look. And to make matters worse, you don't even give a rat's ass about every single character, and it's been a 4 balls. Since either some, such as Barney Ross, Lee Christmas, and Gunnar Jensen, lost the charm they had in the previous films, or most of them, such as Gina, Easy Day, Galen, Lash, and Marsh, and Ocelot, come across as paper thin and one-dimensional. Number two, not only are the action sequences in Expendables the worst of the four, but they're also one of, if not the absolute worst I've seen in an action movie this entire year, due to how not only poorly choreographed and how poorly directed they felt, but also how poorly shot and poorly edited they felt as well. How so, you might ask? Well, when I say that this movie has some of the worst cinematography and editing I've seen in a movie this entire year, I mean it, because the cinematography, and I can't believe I'm doing this for the third time. I can't believe I'm doing this for the third time. It seems like I'm just running the joke to the ground, but this
just be careful not to break your laptop while shaking it.
Yeah, you're right. Because the cinematography, especially when it came to the action sequences in Expendables, it's nothing but a shaky mess throughout. Since it felt so shaky, where you can't even tell what the hell is even going on in some scenes, and don't think the editing is much better either, since it's so choppy to the point where it felt like either Paul W.S. Anderson or a toddler edited this movie. Yes. It felt like a toddler edited this movie. Number three, I thought Ant-Man the Wasp Quantumania, The Flash, 65, and Meg 2 The Trench had some of the worst visual effects I've seen in the movie this entire year when I first saw them. But now that I saw Expendables, to say that I was dead wrong would be a huge understatement. The visual effects in this movie are absolutely abysmal, and without a shadow of a doubt, the absolute worst I've seen this entire year. Since not only did most of them look like something you would find in a PlayStation 2 game, but some of them also looked unfinished. How the fuck this movie cost $100 million to make is beyond me. And number four, and before I explain the number four, I also want to talk about some other things that I also hated. On top of the story of the film feeling nothing more than a bland and muddled mess, and Scott Way's and the directing being absolutely atrocious, the acting was also terrible. I have never been a fan of Megan Fox, and yet she absolutely gives out one of the worst performances I've seen this entire year, mainly due to how obnoxious and shallow she felt. Jason Statham, Sylvester Stallone, Dolph Lundgren, 50 Cent, Tony Jaa, Iko Uwais, and Andy Garcia all feel horribly wasted due to how poorly written their characters felt. The soundtrack was awful, since it's nothing but an obnoxious and scrambled mess of noisy chaos. And not only is the movie filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, and not only is the pacing in this movie a sluggish mess, since for a movie that's 102 minutes long, it felt like it was going on for 3 hours. But it also has one of the most idiotic and predictable twists I've ever seen put on celluloid. This twist was so predictable, was so idiotic, where they also committed character assassination on Stallone's character, Barney Ross. So early on in the film, we find out from the team that Barney Ross is found dead after Ramat, played by Iko Uwais, shoots their blade down, causing Barney Ross to burn to death. So you would think that because Barney Ross is dead, that the torch will be passed over to Lee Christmas, played by Jason Statham, right? Well, he does take over throughout most of the movie, and not all the way, because towards the end of the film, during the last battle where Lee Christmas confronts Marsh, played by Andy Garcia, all of a sudden we see a helicopter using propellers, killing Marsh instantly. And the person that was in the helicopter the whole time, and I'm not making this up, by the way, was Barney Ross himself. And the reason that he's still alive is because he faked his own death. First of all, what the hell were these writers thinking when they came up with that stupidity? And second, yes, it's predictable, but by revealing that he faked his own death, not only does the twist completely assassinate Barney Ross's character by making him into an absolute dumbass, but they also wasted Sylvester Stallone's talent as a result of this. Like, what were you thinking? What were you dumbasses thinking? Overall, Expendables is easily the worst of the Expendables movies and also one of the ugliest and most reprehensible action films I've ever seen in my entire life. And that's why Expendables earns the bronze medal as being the third worst movie I saw in 2023. And since Søren joined me with his number 2, with Expendables 4, which was his number 2, I might as well explain my number 2 as well. Number 2 on my list. When I saw this back in May, I thought it was the worst movie I thought I had just seen the worst movie of 2023, and I didn't think there would be anything else that could possibly top this. That could possibly top Fool's Paradise. And the fact that I saw one more movie later on in the year that was worse than Fool's Paradise shows how bad the next pick is. But we'll get to that after I talk about why Fool's Paradise is number 2 on the list. Not only does Fool's Paradise fail so hard at being a satire on the film industry, but this is one of the most horribly misguided, embarrassingly idiotic, and downright reprehensible movies I've ever seen in my entire life. What's shocking about how bad Fool's Paradise was is that not only was this movie made in 2018, yet sat on a shelf for 3 years before they went under a week of reshoots in December 2021, but this is also one of those movies where you sit there completely stunned and baffled at what you just witnessed by the time the film ends and wonder to yourself, how the hell they wasted such talented people like Kate Beckinsale, Adrian Brody, Jason Sudeikis, Edie Falco, Jason Bateman, and of all the fucking people, John Malkovich and the late Ray Liotta, in a movie that clearly has no idea what it wants to be. And it's nothing but a huge waste of time as a result of this. To say that the story is a horribly misguided and inconsistent mess would be a huge understatement. This is one of those movies where the story of the film feels messy that it can't even decide what it wants to be. At one point, it wants to be a satire on the film industry, but then on the other, it wants to focus on Charlie Day's character, Latte Pronto's rise and fall story, which includes his character all of a sudden getting married by Christiana Dior, played by Kate Beckinsale, except that ends up getting thrown out the window when later on in the film, she comes to see Latte in the hospital, all blinded with the patches in her eye, and ends up divorcing him, all because she thinks that Latte has been getting into fights, even though he clearly wasn't, and because he was getting severely injured on set. I honestly feel like I just lost some brain cells in describing why the story of Fool's Paradise doesn't work. The acting was atrocious, since other than the movie wasting the talents of Kate Beckinsale, Adrian Brody, Jason Sudeikis, Edie Falco, Jason Bateman, John Malkovich, and the late Ray Liotta, Charlie Day's performance as both Latte Pronto and Sir Tom Bainsley felt so shallow and wooden. But that's nothing compared to the worst performer in the film, which is Ken Jeong as Lenny. This is, and I really mean this without a shadow of a doubt, one of the very worst performances and most obnoxious performances from a supporting actor this entire year. Because instead of playing the character of Lenny, who is a publicist of Latte Pronto, it's just Ken Jeong being Ken Jeong for the umpteenth time. Charlie Day's directing was a muddled mess. The musical score was atrocious, mainly due to it sounding like something you would find and download from a music library or a sound effects library on the internet. it was a waste of a good cinematography. The editing was all over the place, and not only was the ending underwhelming as hell, but the pacing is some of the worst I've ever experienced in a movie this entire year. Since for a movie, it felt like 3 hours long instead of 90 minutes. That's why it sucked. And to say that that Charlie Day wrote the screenplay that Charlie Day wrote for the film is one of the very worst of the year would be a huge understatement, especially since other than it containing characters that feel obnoxious and one-dimensional and a very inconsistent tone, as well as having some of the worst and most idiotic dialogue I've ever heard in a movie this entire year, the jokes he also throws in the film are not only lazy, but also absolutely atrocious. Whether it's the shameless selfie joke where the doctor acts like a photographer. Seriously, who the hell does that? Just because he's a fan of Latte Pronto's work, the idiotic scene with John Malkovich that shamelessly rips off the classic 1976 film Network, or the lazy and idiotic fourth wall joke where they had the audacity to make the audience look stupid by throwing in subtitles where Ken Jeong's character is yelling at Latte Pronto because of the music being loud, and even despite the fact he's still speaking English. But that's nothing compared to this other joke, to this one joke that I'm about to talk about next. There's this one joke they threw in the film that pissed me off to no end. And you guys knew this was coming. The fucking suicide joke! The way they handled the joke involving suicide in such an immature and offensive manner pissed me off to no end.
Why is it that the only movie that seemed to have a suicide joke work is Airplane, the original Airplane?
Yeah, really. This, on the other hand, is spiteful, is bitter, and just downright offensive. And I rarely say that, but this is one of those times where it felt like that. So early on in the film, we hear from the producer, played by Ray Liotta, about the passing of Sir Tom Bingsley after he accidentally killed himself while practicing a method acting technique of hanging himself, and yet they all brush this off like it's nothing. As a person who has been dealing with suicidal thoughts, how the movie treats suicide in such an immature manner by playing it for laughs and treating it like it's a motherfucking joke disgusted and angered me to no end. Like, did Charlie Day, while writing the screenplay, even know how human beings fucking work? Especially with how many people have died from committing suicide? What the fuck was he thinking when he decided to write that joke in? Overall, Fool's Paradise is one of the most horribly misguided, embarrassingly idiotic, and downright reprehensible movies I've ever seen. And the fact that I saw one more movie that was even worse honestly shows on how bad this next one is. So Fool's Paradise, you may not be number one, but you're an honorary number one in my book. Nevertheless, you get the bronze medal as being the second worst movie I've seen in 2023.
You mean silver?
Yeah, silver medal as being the second worst movie I've seen in 2023. Fuck this movie.
Now, this year has been a long and bloody battle as to what the worst movie of the year is. For a while, it was Expendables, for a while, it was Sticks the Musical, and for a while, it was Five Nights at Freddy's. But ultimately, it has been decided that a certain movie from early on in the year would take the shit crown as the dog of the year. Because of all the aforementioned movies, they at least had some redeeming qualities. But with Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, I cannot think of a single reason to even be curious about this movie. Now, turning a popular kids icon into a horror film isn't anything new, as evidenced by the recently announced horror parody with Mickey Mouse. But it's like the director misunderstood what made that particular genre at least intriguing. The story is both stock and makes no sense. The production values are dog shit. Like, I'd complain about Pooh's cheap ass mask if I could even see it half the time. The characters are just slasher fodder, and even with the little character Christopher Robin has, he's not even the main focus. It's these dumbass teenagers that would fit in the latest fight the 13th movie. But all those qualities wouldn't bother me so much if it weren't so damn boring. It is extremely boring. I still don't understand why I put the Winnie the Pooh name in the title if outside the opening scene and some character names, this movie doesn't even take the advantage of the Pooh books being public domain. You could call the characters Prometheus and Bob and it wouldn't make a lick of difference. And the worst part is, this director wants to make a cinematic universe out of these movies with not just a sequel, but a Bambi and Peter Pan movie. And honestly, I was just too annoyed and bored of this unorganized, grabtastic piece of amphibian shit that I just have no interest in seeing any of those movies anytime soon. If you see a review of Blood and Honey 2, I have officially gone insane. This is probably the biggest disappointment this year, as this could have been really something. But all Winnie the Pooh blood and bullshit is the number one dog of the year.
And one last thing before we move on to number one. I'm not even kidding when I say that the director of the film, after it was released, he and the studio, Jagged Edge Production, went after people all because his movie got lambasted by critics and horror fans alike. Like, you know what, dude, if you're gonna go after people like, if you're gonna go after people like that just because your shitty movie just got negative reviews and for good reason, fuck you. Fuck you. This implies that you cannot handle the criticism, and honestly, even though I hate to say this because I know how hard it is to make movies, you need to get out of the director's chair and out of the writer's chair immediately. You're a hack. You are a hack. You literally made Jason Freeberg and Aaron Seltzer look good in comparison.
That's saying a lot considering their track record.
Yeah, really. Anyway. Well, I guess it's time to reveal my number one. Folks, I really thought Fool's Paradise was going to be number one. I really did. Because of how much that suicide joke offended and angered me to no end. But my number one worst film of the year was not only one of the most painful experiences I've ever had watching a movie, but I'm not kidding when I tell you this. It made me feel bad for shitting on Jurassic World Dominion as the worst film of 2022. Because this movie had the audacity to pull a Jurassic World Dominion.
Because at least Jurassic World Dominion didn't make the three main actors about as useful as used toilet paper. This movie, on the other hand,
it did. And Søren mentioned it. It was his number 10. This is my number one. My number one worst film of the year, The Exorcist Believer. Fuck this movie. Fuck it straight to hell with a dirty dick. To say that I owe Jurassic World Dominion an apology for calling it the worst film of 2022 would be a huge understatement, because no film tested my patience. No film this year tested my patience and insulted my intelligence the way this piece of shit did. The Exorcist Believer, and I'm sorry, Søren, but I'm gonna have to disagree with you on this. The Exorcist Believer has now dethroned the Heretic and The Beginning as being the worst Exorcist movie I've ever seen. Since this is one of those movies where it ruins a beloved horror classic, not just in terms of the way this sequel ties into the original, but how they completely butchered and treated the OG characters from the original, which I found absolutely insulting. I will get to that in a little bit. Not to mention that watching The Exorcist Believer, it felt like David Gordon Green and his crew completely missed the point of what made the original Exorcist such a scary movie in the first place. And it becomes nothing more than an unwatchable experience as a result of this. And since I couldn't find anything redeeming in this movie, I might as well explain why this is my pick as the worst movie I saw in 2023. I'll explain why. On top of the story being an inconsistent mess, and David Gordon Green's directing being a muddled mess, the acting, while not terrible, wasn't that great. Since not only does it waste the talents of Leslie Odom Jr., Lydia Jewett, Olivia O'Neill, and Ellen Burstyn, but Jennifer.
Not to mention Linda Blair for 2 seconds.
But Jennifer Nettles, Norbert Leo Butz, Raphael Sepsabarge, Alqui, Danny McCarthy, and even poor Ann Dow all give such lackluster performances due to how lifeless and shallow they felt. The musical score was a bland mess, and so was the cinematography, due to it looking like something that came from a made-for-TV movie that premiered on the Lifetime channel. It also has some of the worst pacing I've ever seen in the movie this entire year. And not only is the movie filled with cliches that you've seen in other films before, but there are 3 glaring issues I have with this movie. Number 1, there are so many things wrong with the screenplay written by David Gordon Green and Peter Sattler, but I'll explain the obvious ones that really get me to no end. This movie has some of the most atrocious dialogue I've ever heard in the movie this entire year, including this one line uttered by Ellen Burstyn's character Chris McNeil involving. I'll just save that for last, because this is where I'm going to totally snap if I mention it, which really pissed me off to no end. Not to mention, you don't care about any of the new characters throughout the whole film due to how paper thin, cliche, and one-dimensional they felt. And another reason why this screenplay sucks so much is how it relies so much on exposition to the point where it makes the audience look stupid. Like I stated before, this is the type of writing that really pisses me off to no end. Because by doing that, they're not respecting the audience's intelligence and instead they treat them like they're a bunch of idiots because they're not going to get it. Not to mention, this movie has some of the worst and most obnoxious editing I've ever seen in a movie this entire year. What makes it so bad is how it relies too much on not only quick cut edits, but also jump scares. I know it seems unfair to compare it to the original Exorcist's editing, but here's why that film worked and this didn't. In the original, when you see the demon face, yes, it's a 1 second quick cut edit, but what made it scary and effective was this: the silence. In The Exorcist Believer, however, the editing was trying too hard to be a throwback to that by having a bunch of imagery jump on the screen and thrown in a bunch of loud noise jump scares. Seriously, how many times do I need to say this over and over and over again? Jump scares are not scary. If you're going to use a jump scare in a movie, you need to build tension, then release it before eventually doing so. Not having jump scares be there for the sake of it. This is why The Exorcist Believer fails at being scary, because of it doing the latter. And there's no real tension in it whatsoever as a result of this, due to how non-existent it felt. And this last one, You all knew this. You all knew this was coming. You all knew this was coming. How they brought back Chris McNeil. How they brought back Chris McNeil from the original Exorcist not only felt insulting, but it also committed character derailment. What do I mean by this? Well, when we finally see Chris McNeil halfway through the film, we see that she has written a best-selling memoir about Reagan. About Reagan when she was possessed in 1973 after also spending her life researching exorcisms in every culture while also becoming world renowned for her studies. First of all, it's no wonder why Reagan didn't want anything to do with her mother. She basically exploited her daughter's traumatic experience for the sake of money. And second, this movie basically contradicts itself by having Chris McNeil say that she didn't witness her daughter getting possessed, even though in the first movie she clearly witnessed it in the first place. And her reasoning for it all comes down to this line. This is actually going to get me all fired up. And here's the line. My opinion, because I'm not a member of the damn patriarchy. Like, are you fucking kidding me? You're having Chris McNeil blame these two priests who risked their lives to save your daughter all because she's not a man? You can't be this stupid!
And you know what makes the least amount of sense is the fact that the girl's father is essentially asking her to help, even though she's not the one who did the exorcism. It was the two priests. So
exactly. Oh my god. But if you thought I was done ranting on this, oh no, it gets worse. Later on in the film, when she and Victor, played by Leslie Odom Jr., visit Catherine's home and Chris performs a deliverance ritual on Catherine, she gets stabbed in the eyes by a cross, leaving her blinded for the rest of her life, and to add insult to injury, and I feel like this is the writer's excuse to have her back, she spouts out bullshit involving community, religion, and working together.
Seriously, why the fuck was she even in this movie?
Why the fuck was she even in this movie?
You could literally cut her out of the movie and it wouldn't make a lick of difference. But no, the movie just wants to go member berries and go, remember Reagan McNeil? Remember Cunty daughter? I remember.
I remember that. I remember that.
This is honestly something I would find in either Mad TV or Saturday Night Live, not The Exorcist. And the fact that this is supposed to tie into the original Exorcist is another reason why I found this very insulting. And because of those reasons alone, the ending where Reagan ends up forgiving her mother, Chris, and reuniting with her was so unbelievably idiotic to the point where I literally yelled, "You can't be this stupid!" at the screen.
And that's not even the worst part of the ending. Okay, it is, but this is even worse. There's this priest character that just comes into the scene only to get killed off in like 2 seconds. He was even more useless than Ellen Burstyn. And
hold on.
You can't be this stupid! You can't!
And the way that this movie shamelessly rips off my favorite movie of all time, The Dark Knight, where out of nowhere the demons are like, you have to save one girl, and the other one gets to sent to hell. They choose one girl, and that girl ends up dying and getting sent to hell.
Oh.
I seriously hope you pay Christopher Nolan for the rights.
Like, for real. For real. Overall, The Exorcist Believer isn't just the worst legacy sequel I've seen so far. It's also one of the worst horror films I've seen in general, too. It's a complete slap in the face to one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, to the point where it becomes such an unwatchable experience as a result of this. And the fact that this is the start of the whole trilogy, with The Exorcist Deceiver planning to be released in 2025, is another reason why The Exorcist Believer is easily my pick for the worst movie that I saw in 2023. Fuck this movie. Fuck this movie. Fuck this movie. Fuck it straight to hell with a dirty fucking dick.
And this one clip pretty much says it all. This clip pretty much says it all.
You should be ashamed of yourself, humiliating your sister and me like that. We don't want to talk to any of y'all right now, so take your little gossip column and your embarrassing photographs and just go away!
Wise words, Big Mac. Wise words. That's why it's number one. Well, I'm all pooped out now from having to talk about the worst movies that I saw this year. And to answer your question, no, I didn't see this in theaters. I saw this on my computer, but still. And yes, oh, hold on. No. Dear Evan Hansen is still the worst movie I've seen this decade so far. But this is a close second.
And one more thing about Dear Evan Hansen. My fanfiction dealt with depression better.
Exactly. Well, guys, that's going to do it for tonight's podcast. I hope you all enjoyed all the rage that me and Søren had while doing this. And you know what? I really want to thank you guys for joining Søren and I for another year. It's been a lot of fun doing this. And I know we're not done with 2023 yet, as we still have a few more movies to cover on next time on the podcast, but as well as our best of 2023. But I want to thank you guys for making this for staying with us for another year. Seriously, you guys are the reason we're still here, and we thank you very much for that. We seriously thank you very much for that. We love you guys very much, and that's gonna do it for tonight's stream. Be sure to subscribe to Søren Saunders on his YouTube channel. The link is in the description below. Give him the love he absolutely deserved. He's a very talented creator, and until we meet again later on in the month for the best films of the best films of 2023, as well as the last movies the last 2023 movies we're covering. Hope you all have a good new year, and until we meet again at the end of January, you guys have a good day. Take care and Happy New Year. See you later.